Chapter 3886. Next, Zhuowen saw many powerful evil spirits appearing from the darkness to block the Sea King's path. The huge hull of the ship was constantly shaking. Zhuowen had also been silently observing, and his heart grew heavier and heavier. The evil spirits that attacked the Sea King were no weaker than the giant Black Hand. Some were even stronger. There was even an evil spirit that looked like a horse. It galloped in the darkness and blocked the Sea King's path. It opened its mouth and spat out a strange black flame. The strength of this evil spirit was extraordinary. The black flame that it spat out engulfed the Sea King, causing it to come to a complete standstill. Of course, this standstill was only temporary. The surface of the Sea King's formation was too strong. The golden flame rushed out and fought the black flame with fire. It completely suppressed the black flame and burned it into nothingness. After the golden flame suppressed the black flame, it gushed out and turned into a golden sea of fire. It soared into the sky and swept towards the black horse. The black horse was a high-level evil spirit after all. It had a certain level of intelligence. When it knew that its attack had failed, it simply escaped into the darkness and escaped the attack of the golden flame. Zhuowen had seen dozens of similar attacks. Fortunately, the Sea King's defense was terrifyingly strong. It was not greatly affected by the attacks of so many evil spirits. It also did not affect the Sea King's course. The Sea King is worthy of being one of the top saint ships in the Liyuan main area. It's much stronger than the average godly ship. Zhuowen could not help but sigh. In such a terrifying night, the average godly ship would not be able to travel far before it was destroyed. The night in the Liyuan main area is too terrifying. If one's cultivation is not high enough, even if they have fluorites with them, it is still extremely dangerous. Zhuowen muttered to himself. However, his eyes flashed with excitement. For someone like him who cultivated the universal scripture of heaven and earth, the evil spirits of the night were the best nourishment for him. The more evil spirits there were, the stronger the universal vital energy he cultivated would be. Since he had come to the Liyuan main region, the cultivation speed of the righteous energy would be extremely fast, and this could also be used to nourish his cultivation, which could greatly improve his cultivation realm. Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief. He no longer paid attention to the night sky outside the window. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the bed and took the initiative to control the round cocoon in his body. He wanted to nurture all the grand mist god force in his body as soon as possible. The Sea King slowed down as the sun began to rise from the eastern horizon. Zhuowen opened his eyes. He could feel the Sea King beginning to descend. Dong, dong, dong. At this moment, there was a knock on his door. He opened the door and saw Ziling standing outside. There were 3 other people following behind Ziling. These 3 were naturally the disciples of other forces that had temporarily formed an alliance with them. Brother Daowen, the Sea King has begun to descend. Hongwu Shengzhen is about to arrive. Let's go to the deck and observe Hongwu Shengzhen. Ziling smiled. Zhuowen didn't refuse. After cultivating for an entire night, he had basically mastered the Qi condensation chapter. Although the round cocoon in his body was still in its initial state, he didn't need to control it at all. It could operate on its own and perfectly transform the grand mist god force in his body. The 5 of them walked up to the deck and saw that there were already some cultivators on the deck. However, the Sea King's deck was very large. Although there were many cultivators on the deck, it still looked deserted. Brother Daowen, the Sea King kept shaking last night. I also heard a terrifying roar. Could it be that evil spirits were attacking the Sea King? A young man behind Zhuowen and Ziling asked with a respectful expression. Zhuowen looked at the young man. He was about the same age as him, but his appearance was only average. Zhuowen remembered that his name was Su Rong. He was a disciple of a sect that was even more obscure than the Sagebrush sect. His cultivation was decent, probably at the early stage of the Void God transformation. He remembered that Su Rong had taken the initiative to approach him and Ziling, proposing to join forces with them. Ziling didn't agree at first, but Zhuowen had agreed. She didn't want to reject Zhuowen's request, so she didn't object. Su-Rong was very grateful to Zhuowen. Among the four of them, he was the closest to Zhuowen. Zhuowen looked at Su-Rong and nodded. Yes, the evil spirits that attacked the Sea King last night were not ordinary. They were extremely powerful. I'm afraid that Hongwu Shengzhen's entrance trial won't be that simple. The night here is much scarier than the night in Wukong State. You have to be careful. As soon as he said this, Zi Ling and the others' faces became dignified. They had been cultivating for so many years, so they were no fools. The commotion last night was too big, and they wouldn't associate it with a natural disaster. It must have been the work of evil spirits. They knew very well how sturdy the Sea King was. To be able to make such a big commotion, the evil spirits from last night were not simple. Look, is that the island over there Hongwu Shengzhen? They walked to the edge of the deck, and Zi Ling suddenly pointed down and exclaimed. Zhuowen looked over, and indeed, he saw a huge island below. This island stood in the middle of a boundless sea, and the surrounding sea was not an ordinary sea. The sea water was not the usual blue, but an extremely deep black. The black water was stagnant, motionless, and dead. On the other hand, the only island that stood on the ocean of death was the exact opposite. It was filled with exuberant vitality. Around the island, there were strong ripples of a ray formation, and these ripples were flowing with colorful lights. Zhuowen could see that the colorful array formation was complex and powerful. He couldn't understand it at all. He knew that the level of array formation around the island was far beyond his level, which was why he couldn't understand it. In the center of the island, there were many mountains, and within each mountain, there were many magnificent divine palaces. When the Sea King flew close to the island, Zhuowen said in surprise, "The chaotic energy is so dense. Wow. The chaotic energy is so dense that it can liquefy with a simple grab." Zi Ling waved her hand, and a small pool of sparkling energy liquid appeared in her palm. This was the only island on the Dead Sea, and the chaotic energy surging everywhere was so dense that it could liquefy. At the core of the island, the chaotic energy was so dense that it could solidify. Zhuowen was also deeply shocked. Just how rich was the primal chaos energy on this island to be able to manifest such a phenomenon of solidification? Not only Zhuowen, but all the foreign cultivators on the deck were also shocked by the phenomenon on the island. Chapter 3887. Zi Ling, Su Rong, and the others were also excited. They sat cross-legged on the deck and began to greedily absorb the chaotic energy around them. Zhuowen did not cultivate like the others. Instead, he quietly observed Hongwu Shengzhen on the island. However, the more he observed, the more serious his expression became. Hongwu Shengzhen's island was too remote. It was surrounded by the endless Dead Sea. At least, he did not see a second island within the range of his divine telekinesis. Moreover, he felt that the endless black Dead Sea was very strange. He knew that it was not an ordinary sea. If he was in Hongwu Shengzhen and found out about Hong Shenwu and rescued him, where should he run to? This was a big problem. I can't be impulsive this time. I have to think twice before I act. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He knew that he had to come up with a detailed plan to save Hong Shenwu. It was safer this way. Otherwise, not only would he not be able to save Hong Shenwu, but he would also lose his life. Rumble. The huge hull of the Sea King shook violently for a while before coming to a complete stop. The cultivators who were sitting cross-legged on the deck were awakened by the vibration. They opened their eyes and stood up. Hongwu Shengzhen is here. Those who want to cultivate, don't stay on the deck. Go down and cultivate. The old man with the golden teeth had appeared on the deck at some point in time and was urging everyone to get off the ship. His attitude was very impatient. The cultivators who were cultivating on the deck were too embarrassed to continue cultivating after hearing the old man's urging. Once again, the rainbow bridge appeared on the deck. Everyone stepped onto the rainbow bridge and landed below the Sea King. After stepping off the rainbow bridge, Zhuowen looked around and found that he was in an extremely vast square. At the end of the field stood an extremely grand, arch made of white jade. At the top of the arch, there was a plaque with the words Hongwu Shengzhen written on it. The words were refined, and the brush strokes were like dragons and snakes. It was very impressive. Behind the white jade arch, there were many majestic and extraordinary mountain peaks. These mountain peaks were stacked on top of each other and stood side by side. On each mountain peak stood a magnificent palace. Zhuo knew that this was the complete picture of Hongwu Shengzhen. At this moment, a white-robed old man walked over from the center of the square. His footsteps were very slow, but every step he took seemed to traverse thousands of meters. In just a few steps, he arrived in front of everyone. An expert. Zhuo looked at the old man seriously. From his footwork, he could tell that this old man was not an ordinary expert. His footwork already had the charm of shrinking the ground into an inch. "Are you a fellow cultivator from the Wukong State region?" The old man came forward, cupped his hands at the crowd, and asked indifferently. Elder Wulong was the representative of the Wukong State region. He quickly went forward and greeted, "I am Wulong from the Wukong State region's Zhongzhou, Hong Martial Divine Sect. Greetings, senior brother." The old man glanced at Wulong with a smile. "So you're from the Hong Martial Sect of the Middle Continent. This time, your branch sect leader, Shi Shanhong, has made a great contribution. Lord Gu has been praising your sect leader Shi in front of the Shengzhen Lord. My name is Cho Bai, an outer sect elder of Hongwu Shengzhen. Junior brother Wulong, it's right for you to call me senior brother." This old man, named Cho Bai, after knowing that Wulong was an elder of the Hong Martial Divine Sect, his attitude was obviously much more enthusiastic. Wulong repeatedly said that he did not dare, but he was quite proud in his heart. This time, Shi Shenhong had made a great contribution. The entire Hong Martial Divine Sect was proud of him. Daoist Zhang and the rest looked at Elder Wulong, who was chatting with Elder Cho Bai, with envy. Although Elder Cho Bai was only an outer sect elder of Hongwu Shengzhen, and her cultivation was at their level, her status and knowledge were much higher than theirs. To Elder Cho Bai, they were just country bumpkins who had entered the city. Moreover, if they could build a good relationship with Elder Cho Bai, they might be able to inquire about the entrance trial from her. This way, their sect disciples would have a much higher chance of passing the trial. Ziling and the others, on the other hand, did not look too happy as they followed behind. They were very clear that building a good relationship with Elder Cho Bai was actually a shortcut. Unfortunately, their status could not be compared to Elder Wulong's. Moreover, he was an elder of Hongwu Shengzhen's branch sect, while they could only be regarded as outsiders. Under Elder Cho Bai's lead, everyone smoothly passed through the mountain gate and entered Hongwu Shengzhen's dazzling mountain peaks and palaces. Elder Cho Bai led them to a relatively cheap mountain peak. Compared to the other mountain peaks, this mountain's location was relatively remote. Under Elder Cho Bai's arrangement, Elder Wulong and the others naturally lived in the best palace on the mountain peak. As for Zhuowen and the others, they could only live in a relatively ordinary palace on the mountainside. Zhuowen could also see that the closer one was to the center of the Hong Wu Divine Sect's mountain peaks. The denser the chaotic energy. On the same mountain peak, the higher one went, the denser the chaotic energy. The peak of the mountain had the densest chaotic energy in the entire mountain peak. We don't have many people, and the number of palaces on the mountain peak is not small. If we go up and live, we can live there. Why did Elder Cho Bai arrange for us to live in the mountainside, while Elder Wulong, Daoist Zhang, and the others to live in the mountaintop? Ziling was somewhat unconvinced. Ziling, don't be angry. After all, we are not a force from the central state, and there is a natural barrier between us and them. That Elder Wulong deliberately told Elder Cho Bai about our identity and had her deliberately arrange for us to be at the mountainside. The middle-aged, beautiful woman said with a bitter smile. Ziling sighed softly. How could she not know? She was just feeling indignant and was complaining. There are still more than 10 days before the entrance trial. We can still use this time to cultivate and increase our cultivation. After Zhuowen said this sentence calmly, he casually found a palace on the mountainside and entered seclusion to cultivate. He could feel that there were signs of a breakthrough in his cultivation level. Moreover, the primal chaos energy in the Hong martial sacred sect was so dense. In these 10 days, he might really be able to advance from the nihility god transformation stage to the 5 elements transformation stage. Ling, Su Rong, and the other juniors saw Zhuowen's hard work, and their fighting spirit was ignited. Without further ado, they each found a palace and began to cultivate in seclusion. Chapter 3888. On the day before the entrance trial, the mountain where Zhuowen was suddenly surged with extremely terrifying energy ripples. 3 huge black holes appeared in the sky above the mountain. In the depths of the black holes, all kinds of extremely powerful energy flashed. Everyone who was in seclusion on the mountain was awakened. The first to come out was Ku Xinjue, followed by Li Miao and Lu Hong. The other juniors also came out one after another. Elder Wulong, Perfected Zhang, and the others also walked out of their respective palaces. They frowned as they looked at the 3 black holes that had suddenly appeared in the sky. Someone broke through? Elder Wulong asked subconsciously. He could see that the 3 black holes had appeared in the direction of their mountain. It was obvious that someone on their mountain had broken through. Perfected Zhang was also quite curious. He looked around the mountain peak and found that everyone had arrived. No one had yet to come out of seclusion. Obviously, the person who had broken through was not one of them. Looks like it's someone from the group of people at the mountainside. Ku Xinjue's eyes were like torches. His gaze fell on the mountainside. There stood many palaces. Although they were not as large as the palaces at the top of the mountain, they were still quite imposing and extraordinary. Then, he saw the door of one of the palaces open. A slender young man slowly walked out. He glanced at the mountain peak indifferently. Then his gaze fell on the 3 black holes in the sky. Oh, it's the young man that Lu Xiaodao brought. I didn't expect him to break through at this time. His luck is not bad. Li Miao stood beside Ku Xinjue and glanced at Zhuowen at the mountainside. He did not pay much attention to him. They knew that Zhuowen was only at the peak of the Void God transformation stage. So what if he had broken through now? He was only at the early stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. The gap between them was not small. It was not worth their attention. This child tribulation is not ordinary. It doesn't seem to be an ordinary 5 elements transformation stage tribulation. Perfected Zhang looked at the 3 black holes in the sky. His eyes flickered as he said with some doubt. Elder Wulong said indifferently, "So what if it's not ordinary? He's only at the early stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. He's just an ant. He's not worth our attention." After saying those words, Elder Wu Long shook his head and returned to the palace. Then, he set up a barrier to isolate the outside world. Taoist Master Zhang and the others also shook their heads and lost interest. They all returned to their respective halls. They had thought that someone in their group had broken through, but it turned out that it wasn't the case. They had been happy for nothing. "Brother Ku, let's go back too," Li Miao said disinterestedly. A cold smirk appeared on Ku Xinjue's lips as he said indifferently, "That lad is causing too much of a commotion by undergoing the tribulation here and disrupting our cultivation. Don't we need to remind him to watch his words and actions?" Li Miao was stunned and immediately understood Ku Xinjue's meaning. He grinned and said, "What Brother Ku said makes sense. This kid doesn't know what's good for him. He just had to break through at this time. This is his fault. I'll teach this ant a lesson for Brother Ku." As he spoke, Li Miao jumped down and headed towards the mountainside. Ku Xinjue didn't refuse, but silently looked at Li Miao's figure, while an imperceptible smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. "Senior Brother Ku, if my senior brother makes a move, then he'll surely be able to let this ignorant Daoan know that there's always someone better. He's merely an ant, so how could he have the qualifications to be compared with us?" He actually dared to refuse senior brother Ku's face in the hall. He's truly courting death. Lu Hong leaned on Ku Xinjue's side as she looked at Ku Xinjue coquettishly. Ku Xinjue didn't look sideways, but his right arm suddenly stretched out and firmly held Lu Hong's slender waist within his arm, and he smiled evilly. "Junior sister Lu is truly my confidant. Even though I wouldn't pay too much attention to an insignificant ant, if this ant offends me, then I wouldn't mind teaching him a lesson. A lesson. Lu Hong's delicate figure trembled as she felt Ku Xinjue's strong arm and firm chest. Her entire body seemed to have gone soft, and she practically leaned into Ku Xinjue's embrace. Brother Daowen, you've broken through? Zhuowen's breakthrough caused a huge commotion, and Zi Ling and the others were naturally awakened. They looked at Zhuowen with surprise and joy, and their eyes were filled with envy. Tomorrow was Hanwu Shengzhen's entrance trial. To be able to break through before the trial was definitely the greatest blessing. Of course, Zhuowen's breakthrough was naturally a good thing for them. This way, their team would be stronger and their chances of passing the trial would be higher. Don't come near me. This tribulation is extremely powerful. Zhuowen reminded Zi Ling and the others, and then he landed in a primeval forest on the side of the mountainside. This mountain peak was very large. Although there were many magnificent palaces built on it, not the entire mountain peak was made up of palaces. There were also many primeval forests that were rarely visited by humans, and they were shrouded in thick towering trees. When Zhuowen landed on the top of a primeval tree, he seemed to have sensed something and looked at the top of the mountain. At the top of the mountain, he saw Ku Xinjue hugging Lu Hong and looking down at him condescendingly. His eyes were filled with mockery and disdain. At the same time, Zhuowen also noticed that Li Miao from the primeval fire tower was taking mysterious steps, descending from the top of the mountain and heading straight for him. And the commotion caused by your breakthrough is too great, and it's disturbing our cultivation. If you know what's good for you, get out of this mountain and go somewhere else to transcend your tribulation. Li Miao landed on a mountainside and stood above Zhuowen's palace, looking arrogant as he spoke to Zhuowen. His voice was not loud, but it was like thunder running through the air. Everyone felt as if there were many thunderbolts surging and exploding in their ears, and their eardrums were buzzing. Zi Ling and the others' faces changed drastically. They were not fools, and they could tell at a glance that Li Miao was here to cause trouble. Moreover, Li Miao's request was a little too rude. This mountain peak was originally arranged for the cultivators of the Wukong state to live in. Zhuowen's breakthrough here meant that he was going to transcend his tribulation here. The other mountains are naturally the residences of the cultivators of the other states. If he went to the other mountains, it would be a blatant provocation. At that time, Zhuowen would be surrounded by the other cultivators, and that would be the real danger. Li Miao's actions were obviously pushing Zhuowen into a fire pit. Senior Brother Li, your primeval fire tower is one of the major powers of the Middle State, and Senior Brother Daowen is just a rogue cultivator. Why do you have to be so aggressive? Moreover, we are all cultivators of the Wukong state, and we should help each other. Zi Ling opened her mouth, but before she could finish, Li Miao interrupted her. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to talk about me? Do you believe that I won't destroy you right now? Li Miao said fiercely. Zi Ling's pretty face was pale. She was only at the peak of the Void God transformation stage, and Li Miao was at the peak of the Five Elements transformation stage, which was an entire realm higher than her. If Li Miao really wanted to destroy him, it would be as easy as flipping his hand. Chapter 3889. Li Miao looked at the middle-aged woman calmly and sneered. Sundown sect? I'm sorry, but I've never heard of it. If you want me to give you face, I think you should talk to Perfected Zhang and see if I need to give you face. The middle-aged woman's expression changed. She was at the early stage of the yin-yang transformation realm, but she was being looked down upon by Li Miao. However, she didn't dare to flare up. Li Miao had already made it clear that if she wasn't convinced, she could go find Perfected Zhang of the Primordial Fire Pagoda. Li Miao mentioned Perfected Zhang's name to make the middle-aged woman hesitate. After all, the difference between the Sundown sect and the Primordial Fire Pagoda wasn't small. The middle-aged woman's strength and status were far inferior to Perfected Zhang's. If she really stood up for Daowen, Li Miao would probably ask Perfected Zhang to stand up for him. At that time, the middle-aged woman would have no way to back down. Li Miao saw that the middle-aged woman was silent and revealed a smug look. Today, I'm only looking for Daowin. Just watch. If anyone wants to stand up for him, I won't be polite either. With that, Li Miao looked at Zhuowen and said, "Why aren't you scramming? Do you want me to beat you down the mountain?" Zhuowen suppressed the aura in his body. The tribulation energy in the 3 black holes above him was surging and accumulating, reaching an extremely terrifying level. He looked coldly at Li Miao and said, "Li Miao, I'll give you 3 seconds to get out of my sight. Otherwise, I'll beat you up so badly that even your parents won't recognize you." Zhuowen was furious. It was a good thing that he was about to break through, but Li Miao was like a piece of rat **T. He had completely angered him. However, Zhuowen also knew that this was Han Wushengzhen. He didn't want to cause trouble, so he gave Li Miao a chance to get out of here. He wouldn't care about this guy's rudeness. However, Zhuowen's words were a sign of cowardice in Li Miao's eyes. Li Miao was even more smug. He sneered, "Daowin, you really think highly of yourself. You're giving me 3 seconds to scram? Why don't you look at yourself in the mirror? Since you don't scram, I'll beat you down the mountain. I'll make sure you don't even have a face." As he spoke, Li Miao took a step in the air. Instantly, extremely terrifying ring-shaped ripples erupted around him and spread out in all directions. On the other hand, Li Miao shot out like a cannonball, charging into the primeval forest in the blink of an eye. Li Miao stepped onto a branch and leaped towards Zhuowen, as light as a feather. "You're courting death," Zhuowen sneered in his heart, and completely released his suppressed aura. Instantly, a vast aura soared into the sky. Then, the tribulations that had been brewing in the 3 black holes above the mountain for a long time poured down like a dam. Amongst these tribulations, there were lightning that took the form of dragons, flames that took the form of humans, strange pitch-black winds, one after another. Powerful and bizarre calamities came one after another, smashing into the area of several hundred miles around Zhuowen. Li Miao was naturally within this range, but he wasn't worried at all. It's just a tribulations of the 5 elements transformation. And do you think your tribulations can do anything to me? You only released them when I got close to you. To tell you the truth, I've already seen through your intentions. I just didn't care. So what if I'm within the range of your tribulations? I'm at the peak of the 5 elements transformation. A tribulations of the 5 elements transformation are nothing to me. You, on the other hand, have to face both the tribulations and my attacks. You're dead meat. Li Miao was very proud. He didn't slow down and charged towards Zhuowen. Terrifying lightning streaked across the sky, forming an incomparably large lightning dragon head. It opened its mouth and pounced towards Li Miao. Li Miao didn't care at all. He slammed his palm on the lightning dragon's head. It was just a tribulations of the 5 elements transformation. But the moment his palm collided with the lightning dragon's head, his expression completely changed. He felt intense pain, and then his right hand went numb. When his gaze landed on his right hand, he was horrified to find that his right hand had been charred black by the lightning dragon. He could even smell the fragrance of meat. Dang, dang, dang. Li Miao gathered all the energy in his body and kept retreating. He punched out with his left hand, completely shattering the lightning dragon's head that was left on his right hand. But his right hand was completely mangled. The fragrance of meat continued. It was probably completely cooked. How is this possible? Is this a tribulations of the 5 elements transformation? Li Miao exclaimed in disbelief. He looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen, who was not far away, didn't pay any attention to him. Instead, he was waving his fists. His body was emitting a strange purple gold light as he faced the tribulations descending from the sky. What shocked Li Miao even more was that Zhuowen was actually able to deal with these terrifying calamities with ease, blocking all of them. Boom, boom, boom. While Li Miao was distracted and paying attention to Zhuowen's movements, terrifying flames surged out from the black hole in the sky. These flames manifested into human figures. They held all kinds of flame weapons in their hands and silently pounced at Li Miao. Li Miao reacted. He knew that this wasn't the time to be distracted. He immediately sealed the injury on his right hand and took out a divine sword with his left hand. He slashed at these flaming people. At the same time, Li Miao was also rapidly retreating while bombarding the flaming people. He finally realized that he had been overconfident. He had underestimated Zhua Wen's 5 elements transformation tribulation, and now he had suffered a great loss. Now he had the intention to retreat. He planned to leave the range of Zhua Wen's tribulation. This way, this kid's tribulation wouldn't affect him. However, Li Miao retreated a few hundred miles and found that the tribulation didn't disappear. Instead, it became even more terrifying. There were more and more flaming people in the surroundings, accompanied by a strange pitch-black wind that swept over. This strange wind was actually an attack on his soul. When it blew over, his soul felt piercing pain, as if it would leave his body at any time. When Li Miao looked at Zhuowen, he finally understood why he hadn't left the range of the tribulation. It was because Zhuowen saw that he was retreating and actually took the initiative to follow, firmly locking him in the range of his tribulation. Li Miao was furious. "Daowen, what are you doing? You're transcending a tribulation. Why are you dragging me down with you?" Zhuowen sneered. "Fellow Taoist Li, didn't you say you're going to knock me off the mountain? I'm walking in front of you now. Come and hit me. Knock me off the mountain." With that, Zhuowen destroyed a flaming person and moved closer to Li Miao. Chapter 3890. What a coincidence, fellow Taoist Li. I'd love it if you took advantage of my precarious position and knocked me off the mountain. Wouldn't that be boring? Zhuowen inched closer, the sneer on his face growing wider. Li Miao's scalp went numb. Due to his carelessness, he'd taken a direct hit from the lightning dragon. His strength had been greatly reduced. As for Zhuowen's tribulations, each wave was more terrifying than the last. If he continued to stay, it would be very disadvantageous for him. But with Zhuowen's attitude, he knew he couldn't leave unless he waited for the tribulation to end. Thus, the people around the mountain saw a very strange scene. Within the range of the tribulation, Li Miao was like a stray dog, constantly retreating away from Zhuowen. Zhuowen, on the other hand, was resisting the tribulation as he chased after Li Miao. The two of them weren't fighting, but were instead resisting their own tribulations. It was an indescribably strange scene. "Master, is this really the 5 elements tribulation? Why do I feel like it's even stronger than your yin-yang transformation tribulation?" Ling stood beside the middle-aged woman, looking at the terrifying tribulation in the distance. Her scalp went numb as she asked. The middle-aged woman was also shocked. This was the first time she'd seen such a terrifying 5 elements tribulation. Ling, this Taoist one is definitely not an ordinary void divinity transformation cultivator. For breaking through to the 5 elements transformation to attract such a terrifying tribulation, it means that the heavenly Tao thinks this Taoist when strength far surpasses that of other cultivators of the same level. That's why it sent down a tribulation far stronger than an ordinary 5 elements transformation cultivator. He said. Ling covered her mouth and silently watched the figure in the midst of the disaster. She whispered, "Is he really that strong?" At the top of the mountain, Xinjue let go of Lu Hong's waist. His brows furrowed as he looked at the terrifying tribulation halfway up the mountain. Although he looked calm, his slightly clenched fist showed that he wasn't calm at all. Lu Hong also didn't seem to notice that Xinjue had suddenly let go of her. Instead, she looked down in disbelief at Li Miao, who had been blasted into an extremely sorry state by the calamity. Li Miao was a peak 5-element transformation expert, but he was actually forced to flee like a rat by a mere 5 elements transformation tribulation. This scene was too unbelievable. Senior apprentice brother Ku, senior apprentice brother Li. Lu Hong looked at Xinjue, her beautiful eyes revealing a trace of pleading. She wanted to ask Xinjue to save Li Miao. She had good eyesight and could see that if Li Miao continued to stay in that calamity, It wouldn't be long before he would be half dead from that calamity and might even die because of it. Kushinjue snorted coldly. He reached out with his right hand, and terrifying energy gathered around him. Eventually, it turned into a terrifying giant hand in front of him. The surface of this large watch was overflowing with light, as if it was forged from colored glass. It cut through the void and landed in the primeval forest halfway up the mountain. He broke through the range of Zhuowen's calamity and grabbed Li Miao, who was covering his head and fleeing like a rat, and brought him back to the top of the mountain. Plop! Li Miao fell not far away in a sorry state. His entire body was tattered and emitted an unpleasant burnt smell. Ku Xinjue frowned slightly and gently covered his nose with his hand. He then coldly looked at Zhuowen, who was still undergoing his tribulation, and said coldly, "When the entrance trial begins tomorrow, I'd like to see if you can still be so lucky." With that, Ku Xinjue flicked his sleeves and walked into his own palace. Zhuowen indifferently glanced at the leaving Ku Xinjue. Just now, when Ku Xinjue made a move, he actually had the strength to stop him. But he didn't do so. Right now, the entrance trial had yet to begin. If Li Miao died in his hands, it would be a huge problem. Even if Ku Xinjue didn't make a move, he would still kick Li Miao out and spare his life. "Senior apprentice brother, are you all right?" Lu Hong covered her nose and mouth and hurriedly came to Li Miao's side, who had already turned into a pile of charcoal and continuously called out his name. Unfortunately, Li Miao was heavily injured and unconscious. He couldn't respond to Lu Hong at all. Lu Hong sighed and took out a healing pill. After feeding it to Li Miao, she called Taoist Zhang over. When Taoist Zhang walked over and saw Li Miao's miserable state, he was shocked and hurriedly asked what had happened. Lu Hong recounted what had happened and said with grief and indignation, "Elder Zhang, this Dao one is too arrogant. He actually beat Senior Brother Li up like this. We can't just let it go like this." Taoist Zhang was silent for a moment. He looked at Zhuowen, who was still undergoing his tribulation, and pondered for a moment. Did this kid attack Li Miao just now? Lu Hong was startled, then subconsciously shook her head and said, "Although he didn't attack Senior Brother Li, when Senior Brother Li was about to retreat from the range of the tribulation, this kid actually caught up to Senior Brother Li and prevented you from escaping the tribulation. This is too much." Taoist Zhang smiled bitterly. "Lu Hong, do you still not understand? Since that Dao, when didn't make a move once, if I make a move against him again, we will definitely be in the wrong if Hongwu Shengzhen sends people. At that time, if you provoke Hongwu Shengzhen's people, your entrance trial might be canceled. You have to remember that this is Hongwu Shengzhen, not the Central Province's true fire tower. Here, we have to abide by the rules of others." Lu Hong was startled, but she still said unwillingly, "Are we just going to let Senior Brother Li's matter go like this? Wouldn't that be too unfair?" Taoist Zhang's eyes were dark as he said, "Of course we can't just let it go like this. He injured Li Miao to such an extent that I'm afraid he won't be able to recover in a day. It will affect this entrance trial. After the entrance trial begins, join forces with Kashinjue and the others. It's best if you kill him." Hearing this, Lu Hong also understood Taoist Zhang's plan. She nodded and said, "Elder Zhang, you are thoughtful. I understand this matter. In the trial, I will definitely kill this Dao one." Taoist Zhang nodded and helped Li Miao up. He said, "Follow me to my palace. Tonight, I need to treat Li Miao's injuries. Protect me." With that, Taoist Zhang and the other two hurriedly entered a palace. Zhuowen naturally didn't know about the conversation between Taoist Zhang and Lu Hong. He was still undergoing the tribulation in an orderly manner. As time passed, the power of the tribulation became stronger and stronger. Zhuowen also began to feel the pressure. However, he had many trump cards and was extremely powerful. Although there was some pressure, he still passed through this tribulation without any danger. When he landed halfway up the mountain from the sky, his clothes were already tattered. His exposed skin was dripping with blood in many places. Those were all external injuries caused by the tribulation. These external injuries looked terrifying, but in reality, they weren't serious. As long as he applied some spiritual medicine, he would be fine overnight. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with excitement. He had finally advanced to the 5 elements transformation. He could feel that the vast, grand mist god force in his body had begun to split into 5 different types of energy. They were metal, wood, water, fire, and earth respectively. These 5 different types of energy constantly revolved around each other and finally formed a strange cycle. Chapter 3891. Brother Daowen, congratulations on successfully breaking through the 5 elements change. As soon as Zhuowen landed, Ziling and the others came up to Zhuowen and congratulated him. Even Ziling's elder, the beautiful middle-aged woman, came to congratulate Zhuowen in person. I was lucky to have broken through this time. Everyone, I'm confident that I can take all of you through tomorrow's entrance trial. Zhuowen said proudly. After breaking through to the 5 elements change, Zhuowen could feel the rich and almost surging energy in his body, constantly circulating back and forth in his body. With his current strength, he did not need to rely on any external force to defeat any yin-yang change cultivator. Ziling and the others smiled slightly. They did not take Zhuowen's words to heart. They thought that Zhuowen was just boasting because he had just broken through. Everyone chatted for a while and then returned to their respective halls to wait for the arrival of the next day. Zhuowen sat cross-legged on his bed and began to run the primordial Hongmeng technique to consolidate the realm that he had just broken through. At the same time, he also found that the round cocoon in his dantian had begun to swallow a powerful divine qi. He knew that the great vital energy in his body had basically been absorbed by the round cocoon. The divine qi that he was going to swallow next was far more powerful than the great vital energy. Of course, after the divine qi was swallowed, it turned into the vast Hongmeng divine power in his body. However, after the divine power in his body was mixed with the divine qi, the level of energy became even more extraordinary and powerful. Time flew by, and when Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes, he found that a few rays of warm sunlight had spilled in from the side of the window. He knew that, after a night, today was the day of the entrance trial. He opened the door and found that Ziling, Su Rong, and the others were already waiting for him outside. When they saw Zhuowen come out, they were all excited and went up to greet him. Daowen, take Ziling and the others to the foot of the mountain. Hanwu Shengzhen's people will soon come to the foot of the mountain to pick you up and take you to the entrance trial. The middle-aged woman walked over to Zhuowen and said, Senior, are you not coming with us? Zhuowen asked the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman shook her head. I'm just Ziling's guide. My task is to bring her to Hanwu Shengzhen. I'm not qualified to go to the entrance trial. It's not just me. Elder Wu Long and Daoist Zhang can't follow them either. When the entrance trial begins, Hanwu Shengzhen will arrange for someone to bring us to a certain place where we can keep track of your progress in the entrance trial. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded and saluted the middle-aged woman. Then, he led Ziling, Su Rong, and the others down the mountain. When he reached the foot of the mountain, he found that there were already many young cultivators gathered at the foot of the mountain. Ku Xinjue, Li Miao, and Lu Hong were all present. Li Miao noticed Zhuowen, who had just come down. His eyes were filled with conflicting emotions of hatred and fear. Yesterday, he was beaten to death by Zhuowen's 5 elements transformation. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. In the end, he was seriously injured. Although Daoist Zhang did his best to help him recover last night, his injuries were too severe. After a night of recuperation, he had only recovered about 50% of his strength. His strength was far from his peak. To participate in the entrance trial with such an unhealed body, his chances of passing were much lower. Zhuowen naturally saw Li Miao's resentful gaze. His lips curled into a mocking smile as he ignored Li Miao's gaze. Li Miao was so angry that his shoulders trembled. Damn it! This bastard! If I catch him, I'll make him beg for death. Ku Xinjue glanced at Li Miao, then glanced at Zhuowen, who was not far away, and said indifferently, Brother Li, we still have to prioritize the entrance exam. If I have the chance, I will naturally help you get rid of this ant. But you can't mess up my plan just because you want to take revenge on this ant. Otherwise, there's no need for you to follow me." Hearing this, Li Miao's body trembled. He lowered his head and hurriedly said, "Senior Brother Ku, don't worry. I won't let my emotions affect my decisions." Ku Xinjue nodded. He looked ahead and said softly, "The Hong Marshal's sacred sect is here." A streak of lightning flashed over from the core of Hongwu Shengzhen. With a rumble, it landed at the foot of the mountain. When the lightning faded, an old man in black robes appeared before them. It was Elder Cho Bai, who had brought them to this mountain. "Is everyone here?" Elder Cho Bai glanced at the crowd and asked expressionlessly. "Elder Cho Bai, everyone is here." Ku Xinjue cupped his hands and said respectfully. Elder Cho Bai glanced at Ku Xinjue, and his expression softened. "Nephew Ku, this entry trial shouldn't be a problem for you. This old man congratulates you on becoming Hongwu Shengzhen's disciple." Elder Cho Bai's preferential treatment of Ku Xinjue naturally attracted the envy of everyone present. However, there wasn't any jealousy on their faces. After all, Ku Xinjue was the strongest and had the strongest background among them. Furthermore, he had a deep relationship with Hongwu Shengzhen. Therefore, no one was surprised that Elder Cho Bai treated him differently. "Thank you for your kind words, Elder Cho Bai." Ku Xinjue smiled and cupped his hands at Elder Cho Bai. Elder Cho Bai laughed and didn't say anything else. Instead, he waved his sleeve and a streak of lightning flew out and landed beside him. The streak of lightning turned into a tall and mighty lightning beast. On the lightning beast's broad back, there was a majestic palanquin on its back. The palanquin was very large. Just from its appearance, it could accommodate hundreds of people. "Enter the lightning beast's palanquin," Elder Cho Bai said indifferently. Everyone nodded and entered the palanquin. When they entered the palanquin, they found that the palanquin space was much larger than they imagined. Ku Xinjue and the others were arrogant and took the best seats in front of the palanquin. Zhuowen chuckled and didn't compete with Ku Xinjue and the others. Instead, he found a seat at the back and sat down. Ziling, Su Rong, and the other three sat close to Zhuowen. Waiting until everyone was seated, Elder Cho Bai leaped onto the Thunder Beast's head. "Let's go!" Elder Cho Bai shouted, and the lightning beast roared. Its body exploded with blazing lightning and turned into a streak of lightning that cut through the sky. The lightning beast's speed was extremely fast. In less than a quarter of an hour, they arrived at Hongwu Shengzhen's core hall, the Hongwu Square in front of the hall. Elder Cho Bai jumped off the lightning beast. Ku Xinjue and the other juniors in the palanquin jumped out and landed on the square's jade floor. Chapter 3892. The Hongwu Square was extremely spacious. Within the square, there was a huge stone pillar that was shining with golden light every 300 feet. The sky above the square was filled with thick clouds. Looking from afar, it looked like a fairyland. At the front of the square, a magnificent palace rose from the ground and stood quietly at the end of the square. It was like an ancient god, silently looking down at everything in the square. This is the core of the Hongwu Shengzhen, the Hongwu Square. At the end of the square is the Hongwu Main Hall, the symbol of the Hongwu Shengzhen. Elder Chiu Bai waved her sleeve, and the Thunder Beast turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared into her sleeve. She then pointed at the huge palace at the end of the square that was faintly discernible in the clouds. Zhuowen looked around and finally fixed his gaze on the Hongwu Main Hall. He could not help but click his tongue in wonder. The Hongwu Shengzhen was indeed one of the 4 Shengzhen in the Liyuan main region. The grandeur of the Hongwu Square and the Hongwu Main Hall far surpassed all the buildings in the Hongwu Divine Sect. After arriving here, Zhuowen discovered that the Hongwu Divine Sect could be said to be very simple and crude. One was in the sky, while the other was in the ground. The two could not be compared at all. At the same time, he also discovered that there were many other cultivators in the square. These cultivators were scattered in every corner of the square. The number was spectacular. Zhuowen estimated that there were at least tens of thousands of them. Elder Qiu Bai, these people must be cultivators from the other regions, right? Ku Xinjue looked around and asked Elder Qiu Bai. Yes. Nephew Ku, you must be careful. Some of the geniuses from the subsects are not inferior to you. Some are even more amazing than you. You'd better not fight with these geniuses in this trial. Otherwise, you will suffer a great loss. Elder Qiu Bai cautioned Ku Xinjue and continued. After all, I'm an elder of the Hongwu Shengzhen. I can't stay here for long. You can wait here. When the time comes, an elder will come and take you to the trial ground. With that, Elder Qiu Bai left the Hongwu Square. Not long after Elder Qiu Bai left, several streaks of light appeared in the sky outside the square. Most of them were the outer elders of Hongwu Shengzhen, and they landed on the square with the geniuses of other provinces. Like Elder Qiu Bai, these outer sect elders didn't dare to stay in the square for long and left one after another. About 4 hours later, the participants of the entrance trial had basically all gathered. You're Ku Xinjue from Wukong State subsect? Your cultivation isn't bad, but it's a pity that you'll be trampled under my feet in this trial. A slightly arrogant voice came from not far away from Zhuowen's team. Ku Xinjue's eyes narrowed as a cold glint flashed in his eyes as he looked towards the source of the voice. Behind the stone pillar 10 zhang to the left, a young man in a blue robe slowly walked over with a few people. Beside the blue-clothed youth, there was a beautiful woman holding a sword. The blue-robed youth stared at Ku Xinjue, who was in front of the group. He did not even look at the surrounding cultivators. Zhuowen looked at the blue-clothed youth silently and narrowed his eyes. The blue-clothed youth didn't conceal his powerful aura, and Lin Fan could feel that his aura was even stronger than Ku Xinjue's. There was no doubt that this arrogant blue-clothed youth was a genius whose cultivation was stronger than Ku Xinjue's. Who are you? Aren't you being too arrogant? Li Miao, who was standing beside Ku Xinjue, frowned and couldn't help but retort. The blue-clothed youth coldly looked at Li Miao and said, "Who do you think you are? Do I need trash like you to interrupt when I'm talking? Slap him." As she spoke, the woman holding a sword beside the blue-clothed youth took a step forward and disappeared with a gust of wind. Behind Li Miao, many dancing butterflies appeared. These dancing butterflies gathered together and turned into the woman holding a sword. Before Li Miao could react, the woman's jade-like hand whizzed over and slapped Li Miao's face. Smack! The woman's slap was very heavy, and it was extremely loud. Li Miao was directly slapped forward and his head hit the ground. His posture was like a dog eating feces, and it was extremely unsightly. His cheeks had already swelled up and were extremely swollen, making him look rather miserable. How dare you casually make a move on the Hongwu Square? Lu Hong reacted and screamed as she brazenly attacked the woman holding a sword. The woman holding a sword sneered as her left hand formed a claw and grabbed at Lu Hong's shoulder. Her speed was extremely fast. So fast, Lu Hong's beautiful eyes were filled with fear. The woman holding a sword was too fast, and she couldn't even see the trajectory of her attack. Bang! A palm blocked in front of Lu Hong. When the palm and the claw collided, an extremely shocking energy ripple spread out and spread to the surroundings. The woman holding a sword narrowed her eyes and let out a muffled groan. She floated back and landed beside the blue-clothed youth. "Senior brother Ku, this person is too arrogant. He actually attacked. You must teach him a lesson." Lu Hong was pleasantly surprised when she saw Ku Xinjue save her. "Shut up," Ku Xinjue scolded. Lu Hong immediately shut her mouth and looked at Ku Xinjue in a daze. Her eyes were misty and filled with grievance. "Go and help Miao up." After Ku Xinjue finished speaking, he looked at the blue-clothed youth and said coldly, "Song Juanda, don't go too far. Do you really think that you can trample me under your feet with your current strength? To tell you the truth, I am no longer the Ku Xinjue of the past." The blue-clothed youth looked at Ku Xinjue mockingly and shook his head. "Ku Xinjue, do you still not understand? Those who have lost to me have never had a chance to turn the tables. Your progress is indeed fast. You are already at the early stage of the yin-yang change realm, but so what? You are still no match for me. When the trial begins, you will know how big the gap between you and me is. You should know that a loser will always be a loser. After he finished speaking, the blue-clothed youth revealed an evil smile and slowly walked past Kushinjue with the sword-hugging woman and the rest. Kushinjue clenched his fists tightly, but he did not make a move as the blue-clothed youth walked past him. Zhuowen looked at Kushinjue's back. When the blue-clothed youth appeared, he saw the fear in Kushinjue's eyes. This was the first time he had seen this arrogant young man reveal such a timid side. However, from their conversation, Zhuowen was able to discern that Kushinjue should have been defeated by the blue-clothed young man. Zhuowen shook his head. With Kushinjue's mentality, even if his cultivation was at the middle stage of the yin-yang change realm, like the blue-clothed youth, he would still lose without a doubt. This was because the blue-clothed youth's strength had been deeply imprinted in Kushinjue's heart and had become his inner demon. He had already lost in terms of momentum. In a real battle, what were his chances of winning? Senior Ku, who is that person? Lu Hong asked curiously as she supportedly meow and watched the blue-clothed youth leave and Kushinjue's abnormal behavior. Chapter 3893. It's really Cang Juanda from the Jianglong state. Lu Hong's beautiful eyes narrowed as she felt incredulous. In fact, when Kushinjue first mentioned the blue-clothed youth's name, she had already suspected it. However, she wasn't sure and thought it was just someone with the same name. Now it seemed that she was thinking too much. Everyone in the team began to talk, their eyes filled with awe. Obviously, they had all heard of Cang Juanda's reputation. Zhuowen was a little puzzled as it was the first time he had heard of Cang Juanda. Junior sister Ziling, do you know where Cang Juanda came from? Is he very famous? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Ziling looked at Zhuowen in surprise and asked, Senior brother Daowen, you don't know who Cang Juanda is? Zhuowen shook his head seriously. He really didn't know anything about Cang Juanda. After Ziling confirmed that Zhuowen really didn't know who Cang Juanda was, she looked at him strangely and slowly explained Cang Juanda's origin. Many geniuses from the various states under the jurisdiction of the Liyuan main state would come to participate in this entrance trial. Hanwu Shengzhen subschools were spread all over these states, so their sphere of influence was naturally uneven. Among the many subsects in the various provinces, there were 3 subsects that were publicly recognized as the 3 strongest subsects. These 3 subschools were located in the Jianglong state, Feihong state, and Fenghua state. The foundation and power of these 3 subsects were above the Hongwu divine sect in the Wukong region. The Hongwu divine sect could only be ranked 4th among the subsects, below the 3 subsects. Naturally, the 3 subschools had also sent their most outstanding disciples to participate in the competition. The disciples of these 3 subschools were known as the strongest geniuses of this entrance trial. Cang Juanda was one of them. He was the most outstanding disciple in the Jianglong State subschool, and his cultivation had reached the mid-stage of the yin-yang transformation. In addition to Cang Juanda, there were 2 others, Wang Wenhong from the Feihong State and Ming Yingwu from the Fenghua State. These 2 were very strong, not weaker than Cang Juanda. Zhuo nodded. He was even more afraid of Hanwu Shengzhen now. Hanwu Shengzhen's background could be seen from the fact that a mere sub-school could cultivate a yin-yang transformation middle stage junior. The true geniuses of Hanwu Shengzhen were even more terrifying. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's heart sank. He knew that with how strong Hanwu Shengzhen was, it wouldn't be easy for him to save Hong Shenwu. However, he wasn't someone who would give up so easily. He had to make a careful plan when he entered Hanwu Shengzhen this time. He wouldn't act blindly without thinking. Saving Hong Shenwu was his top priority. Of course, other than investigating Hong Shenwu, he also had another mission, which was to get close to the number 1 spirit master of words in Liyuan main region and have him divine Moyan Wushang's exact location for him. Just as Zhuowen was deep in thought, a dazzling light flashed from the Hongwu main hall at the end of the square. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in the sky above the square. Everyone looked up and discovered that the original body of this stream of light was an old man with a cold expression. The old man's aura was extremely vast. In the void behind him, there were many anomalies. Within the strange phenomenon, there was an extremely huge earth fiend god phantom standing there. Of course, this phantom was faintly discernible and wasn't very clear. Demonic transformation expert Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. This wasn't the first time he had seen an expert in the demonic transformation realm. The most obvious characteristic of a demonic transformation realm cultivator was that their body contained the power of a godly demon. As they walked, the godly demon aura would circulate around their body, forming a terrifying phantom of a godly demon. Of course, a powerful demonic transformation expert could freely control the godly demon aura within their body. This old man's aura was somewhat stiff, unable to conceal the powerful godly demon aura within his body. It was obvious that he had just entered the demonic transformation realm and was unable to control the godly demon aura within his body. On the square, many cultivators had already sensed the godly demon aura within the old man's body. Their faces turned pale as they felt the pressure. Ziling, Su Rong, and the rest who were standing beside Zhuowen were even more unbearable. Their foreheads and bodies were covered in cold sweat, soaking their clothes. Their bodies were trembling and their faces were pale. Everyone, I am the examiner in charge of your entrance trial. Allow me to introduce myself. I am one of the 10 elders of Hongwu Shengzhen, the Grand Elder of Longxiang Hall, Pei Shanglong. The old man's voice wasn't loud, but to everyone's ears, it was like a clap of thunder, exploding and reverberating in their minds. I didn't think that the trial would be supervised by an elder of the 10 halls. It seems like Hongwu Shengzhen places a lot of importance on this trial. Xinjue's eyes were solemn as he muttered to himself. Looking at the old man floating in the air, his face was filled with respect. This trial is getting more and more interesting. Song Juanda, who was standing on the other side of the square, smiled with interest. Pei Shanglong looked down at the crowd, paused for a moment, and continued. The format of this trial is relatively free. I will send you to a small world. The specific rules will naturally appear in the jade slip that will be issued to you when you arrive at the small world. Pei Shanglong waved his sleeves, and suddenly streaks of jade light swept out from his sleeves like rain and fell one after another. These streaks of jade light, as if they were sentient, swept toward every cultivator in the square. A streak of jade light quickly swept over and landed in Zhuowen's palm. Zhuowen only felt his palm was cold, and then there was a thumb-sized jade slip lying quietly in his palm. This jade slip was whiter than snow, and it was warm to the touch. At first glance, one could tell that it was not made of ordinary jade. Ziling, Su Rong, and the others beside him each had a jade slip in their hands. Engrave your names on the jade slip, Pei Shanglong calmly ordered. No one refused, and one by one, they used their fingers as pens and engraved their names on the surface of the jade slip. After everyone had engraved their names, Pei Shanglong waved his sleeves again, and everyone felt a surge of suction, and then the space around them shattered, and they were sucked in. Zhuowen only felt darkness in front of his eyes, and then there was a feeling of the world spinning. When he opened his eyes again, he found that he was no longer in Hongwu Square. The environment around him was similar to some kind of stone forest. Chapter 3894. Everyone, the darkness in this pocket world is even more terrifying than the Liyuan main region. Once night falls, even a God Realm Change powerhouse can't guarantee their own safety. Pei Shanglong hovered high above the stone forest, silently overlooking the crowd below. However, his words caused a huge uproar. When they were on the Sea King, they had seen how terrifying the night in the Liyuan main region was. However, The darkness in this pocket world was even more terrifying than the Liyuan main region. It would be difficult for cultivators like them to survive in such darkness. This was not a trial at all. It was a hopeless road to death. Even the arrogant Ku Xinjue and Tsang Juanda could not help but frown after hearing Pei Shanglong's words. You can rest assured that the trial is not for you to die. In this pocket world, there are a total of 108 halls. These halls contain light sources that could dispel the darkness. However, the darkness in this pocket world is getting stronger by the day. If you want to survive the trial, you must snatch the light sources of the other halls. According to the rules of this trial, you must stay in this pocket world for a month. If you want to survive this month unscathed, I estimate that you will need at least the light sources of 10 halls. I have already told you the details of the trial. What to do next is all up to you. After a month, I will open this pocket world again. The rest of you will be considered to have passed the trial and qualified to join the Hongwu Shengzhen. Pei Shanglong was expressionless from beginning to end. After he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and disappeared before everyone's eyes in the blink of an eye. It can't be. There are only 108 halls in this pocket world, and there are tens of thousands of people participating in the trial. The elimination rate is too high. Ziling was stunned. She finally realized the cruelty of the Hongwu Shengzhen trial. This is only the beginning. As time goes by, the cultivators who obtain the halls will inevitably start a war with the other halls in order to continue living here. In the end, I don't know if there will be even 100 people who will survive. Su Rong's eyes were lifeless. His body was trembling. He knew that their team was finished. Among these 10,000 cultivators, 5 elements transformation cultivators could be found everywhere. They were basically a team of noobs that could be crushed with a single finger. So what if Zhuowen had reached the 5 elements transformation stage? Among this group of geniuses, this kind of cultivation was simply at the bottom. Are you going to give up before it even starts? Zhuowen looked at the depressed Ziling, Su Rong, and the other 3. Ziling gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, I won't give up. Since I've decided to participate in this trial, I'm naturally prepared to die. The eyes of Su Rong and the other 2 flickered. Suddenly, Su Rong cupped his hands at Zhuowen and said hesitantly, Brother Daowen, we're preparing to join Ku Xinjue and the others. Why don't you come with us? Zhuowen looked coldly at Su Rong and shook his head. I've already offended Ku Xinjue. Are you trying to humiliate me by asking me to join them? Su Rong's eyes flashed. Actually, before we entered this place, Lu Hong sent us a voice transmission saying that she's willing to accept us, as long as Brother Daowen lowers his head and apologizes to Li Miao. They'll... Before Su Rong could finish, Zhuowen coldly interrupted him. Brother Su, since you're planning to join Ku Xinjue and Li Miao, you can leave. My team doesn't welcome you, Zhuowen said coldly. Su Rong frowned and shook his head. Brother Daowen, you really don't know what's good for you. Chun Li and Zhou Yuan agreed to join Li Miao yesterday. As he spoke, Su Rong looked at Ziling and said, Senior sister Ziling, come with us. Brother Daowen's strength is not bad, but compared to Ku Xinjue and the others, there's still a big gap. Zhuowen looked on coldly. He didn't even look at Ziling. This team was originally proposed by Ziling, and Su Rong and the others had taken the initiative to join their team. He had never planned to form a team. Since they wanted to leave, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't persuade them to stay. Ziling looked at Zhuowen and then looked at Li Miao and Lu Hong, who were not far away. No, Brother Su, I still plan to team up with Senior Brother Daowen. To Zhuowen's surprise, Ziling chose to stay. Su Rong shook his head and didn't try to persuade her. Instead, he led Chun Li and Zhou Yuan to Li Miao's team. Senior Brother Daowen, didn't Ku Xinjue and the others not accept cultivators below the 5-element change stage? Why did they accept Su Rong and the others? Ziling looked at the backs of Su Rong and the others, puzzled. It's just Li Miao's little scheme. We don't have to meddle in other people's business. Junior sister Ziling, since you've chosen to trust me, I'll help you pass this trial. Zhuowen said seriously to Ziling. Zhuowen had a good impression of Ziling and had already decided to help her pass the trial. Ziling nodded and smiled bitterly in her heart. She didn't have much confidence in Zhuowen's strength. The only reason she was willing to stay was because she was a person of principle. She had already agreed to team up with Zhuowen. Even if she didn't believe in Zhuowen's strength, she naturally wouldn't change her mind at the last minute. At that moment, the cultivators in the stone forest had already begun to form their own groups and rush out of the stone forest in different directions. They weren't idiots. Since Pei Shanglong had said that there were 108 halls here, each hall must be able to accommodate a lot of people. Competing for the halls here, wouldn't it be suicide to fight alone? Unless it was a super genius like Song Juanda, whose strength far exceeded everyone else's. Therefore, they were all forming their own groups to strengthen their own teams, hoping to increase their chances of winning this trial. Of course, this kind of forming was limited to the scope of their respective states. As for cultivators from different states, it was difficult to form a cooperation. After all, they weren't stupid. They knew that those who weren't of their own race must be killed. This was also why Kaxin Jue and Li Miao were willing to rope in Su Rong and the others. Zhuowen had thoroughly offended them, so naturally, they couldn't lower their faces to rope in Zhuowen. When Li Miao saw Su Rong and the others, he couldn't help but frown and ask in a low voice, "Where's Ziling?" Su Rong trembled in fear and said submissively, "Senior brother Li, Ziling plans to stay with Daowen and doesn't want to join our team. We can't persuade her." Li Miao was extremely displeased and scolded. "You three are useless. You can't even handle such a small matter. What's the use of having you?" Su Rong and the others trembled in fear. Although they felt humiliated, in order to survive the trial, they had to endure this humiliation and firmly follow Li Miao and Kaxin Jue. Chapter 3895. The small world was extremely vast, and most of the terrain here was gray. As far as the eye could see, there were deserts, wastelands, stone forests, and other relatively desolate terrains. After Zhuowen and Ziling rushed out of the stone forest, they rushed toward the southwest. Senior brother Daowen, look, new information has appeared in our jade slips. This information actually records the specific locations of the 108 palaces in this small world. Ziling suddenly exclaimed, and Zhuowen heard this and took out the jade scroll on his body. After his spiritual force landed on the jade slip, he indeed found new information in the jade slip. Just as Ziling had said, the information was a map of the 108 temples. Zhuowen also noticed that nearly half of the 108 temples had turned red, and the rest were still green. These two colors also had corresponding descriptions in the jade scroll. The red led to the main hall that had been occupied by someone else. The remaining green ones had not been occupied yet. Brother Daowen, the location of the temples is marked in the jade scroll. Ziling was worried. She had originally wanted to find a remote place, an inconspicuous temple, so that the competition would be much smaller. However, who would have thought that the jade slip would directly indicate the specific locations of the 108 palaces? Thus, no matter which palace they occupied, they would still be easily discovered by others. It's okay. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. Let's occupy one of the temples first. About 100 miles in front of us, there is an unoccupied temple. Let's go to that temple first. Zhuowen's face was calm, and he took Ziling straight to the temple. Although Ziling was still worried, she knew that this was the only way to go. She looked at the sky and found that the sun was gradually setting in the west. It would not be long before night invaded the entire small world. At that time, if they could not enter the temple, they would not be able to get any protection, and the great horror in the darkness would completely tear them apart. An hour later, the two of them arrived at a large rift valley that stretched across several mountain peaks. In the depths of the rift valley, the outline of a temple was faintly discernible. Zhuowen and Ziling were both refreshed, and they knew that they had found the temple successfully. Senior brother Daowen, this palace has already turned red. Someone has occupied it before us. When it had just stepped into the Rift Valley, Ziling glanced at the jade scroll and could not help but be disappointed. So what? We'll just take it directly, Zhuowen said calmly. Ziling said dejectedly, none of the cultivators who participated in this trial are weak. Ziling felt that their cultivation was relatively weak, and if the one who occupied this temple was ruthless, they would be finished. Zhuowen looked calm and pointed to the sky and said, Sister Ziling, do you think we still have time to find the next temple? Only then did Ziling realize that the setting sun in the western sky was as red as blood. She was afraid that in less than half an hour, the setting sun would completely set and the world would be plunged into terrible darkness. They really did not have time to search for the next temple. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. When the two stopped at the entrance of the Rift Valley, a gust of wind swept behind them, and in the blink of an eye, they passed by. More than a dozen people swept past them, rushing toward the temple in the depths of the Rift Valley. The leader of this group of people was a slightly plump young man, but his eyes were cold. The young man just looked at Zhuowen and Ziling coldly, and he did not intend to stop. If it were not for the sky being dark, according to his personality, he would have stopped to kill Zhuowen and Ziling to satisfy his somewhat perverted impulse to kill. Let's go too. Zhuowen was as calm as an ancient well. He led Ziling, who was obviously worried, towards the palace. After a while, they came close to the temple. The temple was not big, and the surface of the temple made of white jade looked a little shabby, and some parts were even a little damaged. Zhuowen also noticed that the white jade that made up the temple was not ordinary white jade, but something similar to fluorite. He guessed that the entire temple should be able to release a blazing light, and, in the darkness, it should be able to dispel the terrible darkness of this world. The area of the temple was not large, and the space inside was quite narrow. Even if they squeezed, it would be difficult to accommodate nearly 100 people. The most suitable number of people for this temple should be about a dozen or so. At this moment, there were two groups of people at the entrance of the temple. One group of people was the group of plump young men who had just passed by Zhuowen. The other group of people was about 7 or 8 people, led by a burly man with a giant hammer on his back. In addition to these two groups of people, at the entrance of the temple, there was a beautiful woman whose appearance and beauty were impeccable. She frowned and looked at the two groups in front of the door. This beautiful female cultivator was surrounded by 10 young women, who were probably her companions. Zhuowen's arrival did not attract the attention of these 3 groups of people. They only glanced at him before withdrawing their gazes, and they did not pay much attention to him. Zhuowen and Ziling's cultivations were too ordinary, and there were only 2 of them. There were basically no threat to these 3 groups of people. Ma Junfeng, me UNC, don't go too far. I was the one who occupied this temple first. Why do you have to ask us to give it up? The beautiful female cultivator's beautiful eyes were icy cold, and her voice was as cold as ice. At the same time, waves of energy surged within her body, and the surrounding air seemed to have frozen, causing the temperature to drop rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the surroundings were like a world of ice and snow. There was no doubt that this cold female cultivator should have some kind of ice attribute Dao root, and her cultivation was not bad. She should be around the late stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. Ma Junfeng was the plump young man. His gaze was slightly fearful as he grinned and said, the number 1 genius of Sky Snow Province, Li Xinbing, really lives up to her reputation. Your Ice Dao root is formidable indeed, but do you think you alone are a match for me and Brother Me? And do you think your companions are a match for us? Junior Sisterly, how about this? We will make things difficult for you. You give up the temple, and we'll let you stay beside it. The temple's light should be able to cover an area of a few kilometers. This way, you'll be able to survive the night, right? The tall and sturdy me UNC roared with laughter and said, Junior Sisterly, I think Brother Ma's suggestion is good. It's beneficial to both of us, and we don't have to fight to the death, right? Li Xinbing's beautiful eyes were icy cold. How could she not see what Ma Junfeng and Mi Unc were planning. If she really gave up the temple, how could Ma Junfeng and Mi Unc let her stay beside it? Chapter 3896. Junior Lee, have you made up your mind? Ma Junfeng and Mi Unc took a step forward, forming a pincer formation in front of Li Xinbing. Their auras were as strong as rainbows. As long as Li Xinbing dared to make a move, they would immediately act. Just as the three of them were about to confront each other, Ma Junfeng suddenly glanced at Zhuowen and Zi Ling, who were enjoying the show not far away. Wang Tao, Qin Yang, the two of you, take care of those two trash. Don't let them take advantage of us. Ma Junfeng said darkly. The two young men in Ma Junfeng's team nodded and smiled at Zhuowen and Zi Ling. Without saying a word, they rushed towards the two of them, their early-stage 5 elements change realm aura surging out. After Ma Junfeng gave the order, his attention was no longer on Zhuowen and Zi Ling. Instead, he was staring at Li Xinbing, who was standing at the door. Zhuowen and Zi Ling were both at the early stage of 5 elements change realm and the peak of hollow god transformation, respectively. It would be a piece of cake for him to send out 2 early-stage 5 elements change realm subordinates to take care of them. Mei Yuanci and Li Xinbing naturally didn't care about Zhuowen. Their confrontation had reached a critical point. If any of them made a move, it would immediately trigger a fight between the three of them. Senior Brother Daowen, let's retreat first. Ziling saw 2 young men in Ma Junfeng's team who were at the early stage of the 5 elements change. Their auras were strong, and they were headed straight for them. A trace of fear appeared in her eyes. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and sneered in his heart. This Ma Junfeng was really narrow-minded. They were just watching from the sidelines, and he wanted to kill them. Don't worry, it's just 2 grasshoppers. Zhuowen shook his head and walked forward slowly with a calm expression. It was as if he wasn't going to fight, but was instead taking a leisurely stroll in the back garden. This guy has a death wish. Wang Tao and Chun Yang saw Zhuowen's arrogant behavior, and their hearts were filled with disdain. However, their attacks didn't slow down at all. In fact, they were even more aggressive. They wanted to beat this pretentious young man into a pulp. When they arrived in front of Zhuowen, they saw Zhuowen slowly throw out a punch. This punch was very slow and weak. They laughed, laughing from the bottom of their hearts. However, this ridicule did not last for long. Their faces stiffened, and a piercing pain appeared in their hearts. Then, they saw 2 phantoms of fist energy land on their chests. That was the shadow of Zhuowen's fist. Because it was too fast, they could only see the shadow. Zhuowen had already retracted his fist and was looking at them calmly. How could it be so fast? This was the last thought that appeared in their minds. Then, they spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards in a sorry state. The 2 figures smashed into the entrance of the palace. The 3 people who were originally facing each other at the door seemed to have sensed something. When they saw the 2 figures smashing towards them, they immediately withdrew their auras and retreated separately. Boom! These 2 figures heavily smashed into the palace's entrance, smashing the steps to the palace's entrance into pieces. Furthermore, in the ruins of the steps, they were constantly twitching and bleeding from their 7 orifices. Even if they weren't dead, they were already crippled. Ma Junfeng looked at the 2 twitching figures, his pupils constricting to the extreme. This was because these 2 were none other than Wang Tao and Chun Yang, the 2 people he had sent to kill Zhuowen and Zi Ling. He turned his head to look at Zhuowen and Zi Ling and found that they were unharmed. This guy, Ma Junfeng, was shocked. How did these 2 do it? How did they manage to defeat Wang Tao and Chun Yang in the blink of an eye? His mind was completely focused on Li Xinbing, so he didn't pay attention to Wang Tao and Chun Yang's battle. He didn't know how they were defeated. Mei Yuanci looked at Zhuowen with some confusion. He also did not understand how a mere early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator could defeat 2 early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivators in such a short time. Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen curiously. She happened to be standing at the entrance and saw more than Mei Yuanci and Ma Junfeng. She knew that Zhuowen's strength was not just that of an early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator. This seemingly ordinary young man actually gave her a lot of pressure when he burst out with his energy. It was as if a sword was suddenly hanging by her neck. That sense of crisis made her feel very uncomfortable. She also knew that this young man was very strong. He was probably stronger than her, Ma Junfeng, and Mei Yuanxi. Zhuowen walked slowly towards Ma Junfeng. As he walked, he looked at Ma Junfeng and said calmly, "These two are your subordinates. Did you send them to kill us?" Zhuowen walked very slowly, but his voice was very cold. It made people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Ma Junfeng's eyes narrowed. This young man killed 2 of his subordinates, and now he was questioning him. This was too much. A mere early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator. Even if he was stronger, how could he be a match for a late-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator? Who do you think you are? How dare you question me? I'll give you a chance. Kneel in front of me and break your own arms. Perhaps I'll spare your life and forget about the fact that you killed my subordinates. Ma Junfeng's eyes were cold. The aura of a late-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator completely erupted from his body. The power of the 5 elements transformed into 5 different types of energy that revolved around his back, forming a 5-colored ring. This was the physical appearance of the 5 elements transformation cultivator. It was called the 5 elements ring. Hee, break your own arms? Zhuowen laughed. But not only was his laughter cold, it was also filled with dense, killing intent. Then, like a ferocious beast, he took a step forward and shot towards Ma Junfeng like an arrow. "You're courting death." Ma Junfeng was both shocked and furious. He didn't expect this early-stage 5 elements transformation cultivator to be so ignorant. He actually dared to attack him. Ma Junfeng was really angry. He wanted to cripple this young man and then torture him to death. Rumble. Suddenly, the 2 of them collided. Ma Junfeng was shocked to find that his attack was instantly broken. He let out a muffled groan and retreated. Just as he was retreating, a palm suddenly swept over and grabbed his right hand. "You want me to break my own arms?" A cold voice sounded in his ears. Then, the hand exerted force, and Ma Junfeng's right arm was completely twisted. The intense pain caused Ma Junfeng to scream involuntarily. But it wasn't over. The hand grabbed his left hand like a ghost and exerted force again. The crisp sound of bones cracking was heard again. His left arm was also twisted and shattered. Ma Junfeng let out a shrill cry. His arms were crippled in the blink of an eye. Finally, fear rose in his heart. Where did this young man come from? How could he have such terrifying strength? The moment his arms were crippled, the hand clenched into a fist and slammed into the 5 elements ring on his back. A surging mighty force erupted, and Ma Junfeng could only watch as his 5 element ring was smashed into pieces. No, with the 5 elements ring broken, Ma Junfeng was basically crippled. His 5 elements transformation technique was about to dissipate, and he would slowly become a cripple. Sadly, Zhuowen didn't have the slightest bit of pity. He grabbed him by the collar and threw him to the ground. Then he quickly crushed his kneecaps and forced him to kneel before him. "Break your own arms and apologize on your knees." Is that what you said? Chapter 3897. Everyone stared blankly at the scene in front of them, as if they had been petrified. Ma Junfeng threatened to have Zhuowen break his own arms and kneeled down to apologize. He was insufferably arrogant. Everyone thought that Ma Junfeng had the right to do so. After all, Ma Junfeng was at the late stage of 5 elements transformation, while Zhuowen was only at the early stage of 5 elements transformation. The difference in their cultivation levels was obvious. But now, Ma Junfeng, who they thought would win, was easily defeated, had his arms broken, and was kneeling in front of Zhuowen, who was only at the 5 elements transformation stage. The roles of the two were suddenly reversed. So strong, Ziling was in a daze for a while. Then, her face lit up with joy. She finally understood that Zhuowen's confidence did not come from arrogance, but from his own strength. He was only at the early stage of 5 elements transformation, but he could easily kill a late-stage 5 elements transformation master. Perhaps she could really pass the test if she followed Zhuowen and joined Hongwu Shengzhen. Thinking of this, Ziling couldn't help but feel excited. She knew that she had followed the right person. The hairs on Mei Yuanxi and Li Xinbing's body stood on end as a chill ran down their spines. They stared at Zhuo as if they had seen a ghost. Ma Junfeng, who was at the same level as them, was beaten up so badly by this ordinary youth. Who was this guy? How could he be so strong? Please let me live. Ma Junfeng spat out a mouthful of blood. He bent his body with difficulty and kowtowed a few times to Zhuo, stuttering as he spoke. Ma Junfeng was terrified. He knew that he had met a tough opponent this time. Even though he was only at the early stage of 5 elements transformation, his strength was far beyond his own. He didn't dare to provoke such a ruthless person, so he begged Zhuowen for mercy. Get lost. Zhuowen glanced coldly at Ma Junfeng, but didn't kill him. Instead, he looked at Mei Yuanxi. What? You want to stop me too? Zhuowen said calmly. Mei Yuanxi's scalp went numb. He quickly smiled and retreated to the side. What a joke. Ma Junfeng was beaten up so badly. His strength was on par with Ma Junfeng. If he went up now, he would be courting death. After Mei Yuanxi stepped aside, Zhuowen walked straight to the entrance. His gaze landed on Li Xinbing, who was blocking the entrance. Li Xinbing's beautiful eyes were filled with dread. Her delicate hands were clenched together nervously. Her heart was filled with both fear and unwillingness. Of her, of course. Senior Sister Li, forget it. We. Behind Li Xinbing came a sweet-looking young woman. She bit her lip and put her right hand on Li Xinbing's shoulder. Li Xinbing shook her head. She looked at the ordinary-looking young man in front of her and said softly, Senior brother, I see that there are only 2 of you. There is still space in this hall. I'm willing to share it with you. Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen nervously. Although the hall wasn't big, it could accommodate more than 10 people. Li Xinbing's team only had 10 people in total. It was more than enough for Zhuo and Ziling to live in. Zhuowen glanced at Li Xinbing and didn't say anything. He turned to Ziling and asked, Junior Sister Ziling, what do you think? Ziling came back to her senses and immediately came to Zhuowen's side. She looked at Li Xinbing and the 9 trembling female cultivators behind her. Senior Brother Daowen, the hall is not small anyway. As long as they don't get in our way, there is no need to drive them out. Ziling said nervously. Ever since Zhuowen showed his strength and easily defeated Ma Junfeng, her attitude towards Zhuowen became more cautious and cautious. Zhuowen didn't care about Ziling's change in attitude towards him. He nodded and said, In that case, let's enter the hall. As long as you don't get in our way, we will not do anything to you. After that, Zhuowen led Ziling and Li Xinbing into the hall. Although the hall was small, due to the architectural style, it didn't look cramped. In front of the hall, there was a headless statue. Zhuowen pulled Ziling along and sat down on the futon in front of the statue. At that moment, the sun outside the hall was about to sink into the ground. The sky was dark, as if it was engulfing the land. Mei Yuanxi's expression changed slightly. He walked forward and said to Li Xinbing, Junior Sister Li, I am willing to join your team. You should also know that in the land of trials, you don't just need to find a palace to smoothly survive for a month. After this, the number of halls will only decrease, and the competition will only get more intense. If I join your team's strength will increase a lot. Won't that increase your chances of passing the trial? Li Xinbing's beautiful eyes moved. She looked at Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the statue. Seeing that he didn't have any objections, she couldn't help but be moved. She also understood that there were many capable people in this trial. Although a late-stage 5 elements transformation stage was good, the chances of passing the trial were still relatively small. In fact, if Mei Yuanxi joined them, their strength would increase a lot. There is not much space in the hall. At most, It can only accommodate 3 more people. Li Xinbing looked at the dozen people behind Mei Yuanci and said hesitantly. Mei Yuanci laughed heartily and said, I will only bring 2 people into the palace. The rest of you can wait outside the palace. As long as you are within the range of the light source, I believe that the things in the darkness won't dare to do anything to us. Li Xinbing looked at Zhuan's back. Seeing that he still didn't have any reaction, she was completely relieved and nodded. Then we welcome Brother Mei to our team. Mei Yuanci heaved a sigh of relief. He picked 2 of the strongest cultivators in his group and followed Li Xinbing into the hall. However, after entering the hall, Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanci sat far away from Zhuan. Thinking back to how Zhuan crippled Ma Junfeng with one move, they still had lingering fear in their hearts. They were full of respect for Zhuan. The remaining cultivators in Mei Yuanci's team stayed outside the hall. They didn't have any complaints. After all, they were weaker and understood that the treatment they received was different. The most miserable one was Ma Junfeng. At this moment, he was being supported by 2 of his companions. The group leaned against the wall beside the hall. Ma Junfeng's 5 elements ring was broken and his limbs were crippled. Even if he recovered from his injuries, he was basically a cripple. If Ma Junfeng was in the outside world, his elders could still bring him away. However, he was still in the trial grounds. If he couldn't survive a month, Ma Junfeng would definitely die. Chapter 3898. Hoo. A mournful cold wind blew. Night had completely fallen. The outside world had completely sunk into pitch-black darkness. As the darkness engulfed them, the palace in the depths of the Great Rift Valley began to emit a faint light. Zhuan raised his head and slowly looked at the headless statue in front of him. The headless statue emitted a blazing light. This light rushed to the top of the palace and scattered into countless light spots. They spread out in all directions and instantly enveloped the entire palace. If it weren't for the fact that he was in front of the statue, Zhuan wouldn't have been able to see through this mystery. It seemed that the headless statue was the main source of light for the temple. Zhuan also noticed that the palace's radiance was extremely exuberant. It spread out and enveloped an area of 1 mile outside the palace. Ma Junfeng and the rest, who had been waiting outside the hall with apprehensive hearts, sighed softly when they felt the light enveloping them. They knew that as long as they stayed within 1 mile of the palace tonight, they would not be in any danger. Zhuan frowned slightly. He looked through the door into the darkness a mile away. For some reason, he had a feeling that the darkness in this small world was unusual. Thinking of this, Zhuan secretly circulated the grand mist god force in his body and gathered it in his eyes. In an instant, his eyes pierced through the darkness and saw the scene in the depths of the darkness. Zhuan broke out in cold sweat the moment he saw this. In the darkness, evil spirits stood in great numbers, running like the wind. In Zhuan's eyes, the aura of these evil spirits was vigorous and strange. They were not inferior to the 2 double-level evil spirits, Prado and Salado, that he had encountered in the central province. In other words, in this darkness, the weakest one was a Dou-level evil spirit. Zhuan broke out in cold sweat. It seemed that Pei Shanglong hadn't deceived him. The darkness of this small world was even more terrifying than the Li Yuan main region. Farther away from the Great Rift Valley, Zhuan saw a gigantic evil spirit that was hundreds of feet tall. It was far more terrifying than the other evil spirits. This demonic beast had the head of a wild boar, and its 2 pitch-black fangs were densely covered in black patterns. His fat belly rippled like the surface of a lake as he walked. Wherever this pig-head evil spirit passed by, the fighting-level evil spirits around it would make way for it and hide at the side, trembling in fear. Warrior-level demonic charm. Zhuan's gaze turned serious. He could tell at a glance that the strength of this pig-head evil spirit was far beyond the fighting-level evil spirit. Its level should be above the fighting level. Zhuowen had a bad feeling because he realized that the pig-headed evil spirit was heading straight for the palace in the depths of the Great Rift Valley. Boom! Boom! The pig head walked closer and closer. Every step he took caused the ground to tremble. The people who were originally resting in the hall naturally felt this unusual vibration. What happened? Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanxi were the first to react. They immediately walked to the entrance of the hall and peered into the darkness. However, the darkness blocked their vision and divine sense. They could not see the specific scenery in the darkness. They could only feel that there was a huge monster approaching the palace step by step. Boom! 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 The sound of the earth shaking got closer and closer. Finally, it stopped right in front of them. Everyone inside and outside the palace was nervous. They all knew that a huge monster had stopped at the edge of the palace, which happened to be the boundary of the light source. Ma Junfeng sighed and smiled. It should be an evil spirit. However, we have the palace's light source here. This evil spirit won't dare to come in. Before Ma Junfeng could finish speaking, a fat hand suddenly swept over from the edge of the light source. Like a bolt of black lightning, it flashed through the light source and caught Ma Junfeng in an instant. Ma Junfeng did not even have time to react before he was grabbed by the hand and dragged into the darkness. Immediately after, Ma Junfeng's tragic scream and the sound of some kind of beast chewing on its prey could be heard. The crunching sound of teeth crunching on bones was especially horrifying in the darkness. After a while, Ma Junfeng's screams stopped abruptly. The surroundings were silent. Senior Brother Ma has been eaten. Outside the palace, a male cultivator's eyes were glazed over. He was so scared that he fell to the ground and almost peed his pants. His voice was filled with sobs. For a moment, everyone outside the palace was in a panic. They were terrified. The palace's light source could not block the evil spirit in the darkness. How terrifying was this evil spirit? Zhuowen stood up and came to the door of the palace. He silently looked at the pig-head evil spirit at the edge of the light source. He saw with his own eyes that Ma Junfeng was eaten by this evil spirit. Moreover, after eating Ma Junfeng, the evil spirit was not satisfied at all. It reached out its hand again and attacked Ma Junfeng's companions. Ma Junfeng's companions were not as strong as Ma Junfeng. How could they resist the evil spirit's hand? They could not resist for long before they were killed by the evil hand. Then, the evil hand rolled and dragged them all into the darkness. Senior Brother Daowin, why is the darkness in this world so terrifying? Even a light source can't block it. What should we do? Ziling walked to Zhuowen's side. Her beautiful eyes were filled with fear and helplessness. Zhuowen did not make a sound. He silently looked at the evil pig eating heartily in the dark. Suddenly, he lifted his leg and walked towards the evil pig. Senior Brother Daowin, come back quickly. Ziling saw Zhuowen walking towards the darkness and was scared out of her wits. She quickly called for Zhuowen to come back. Unfortunately, Zhuowen did not seem to hear her. He continued walking slowly. He needed to confirm his thoughts. Mei Yuanxi and Li Xinbing also saw Zhuowen's suicidal behavior. They were confused, but did not stop him. Mei Yuanxi even thought that it would be best if Zhuowen died in the hands of the evil spirit in the darkness. The sound of chewing could be heard in the darkness. The evil pig head who was eating heartily also noticed Zhuowen, who was slowly walking over. His blood-red eyes shone with a bloodthirsty light. This human was really stupid. Since he sent himself to its doorstep, it would gladly accept it. Roar! The evil spirit roared and attacked with its demonic hand again, trying to grab Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a purple-gold light. He immediately saw the evil spirit's movement and took a step back, dodging the demonic hand. A look of surprise appeared on the pig's face. He did not expect this human to be able to dodge his attack. However, the evil spirit did not mind. It swung its demonic hand and tried to grab Zhuowen again. Zhuowen turned around and retreated into the temple. You're crazy. Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanxi saw the demonic hand attracted by Zhuowen and retreated into the depths of the temple. Their eyes were filled with despair. Zhuowen pulled Ziling and landed in the temple. He silently looked at the demonic hand that was about to reach into the temple. Just as the demonic hand was about to reach the entrance of the temple, the headless statue in the temple suddenly emitted a blazing light. Chapter 3899. Roar, roar, bang. The gigantic demonic hand landed in front of the door. The evil spirit in the darkness turned around and ran away as if it had met its worst enemy. In an instant, the surrounding darkness, which was filled with cries and howls, became completely silent. The people in the hall, who were originally on tenterhooks, were stunned for a moment. Then they all looked as if they had just survived a disaster. Senior Brother Daowan, you already knew that the evil spirit in the darkness couldn't invade the hall. Ziling heaved a sigh of relief and came to Zhuowen's side. Her beautiful eyes shone as she looked at Zhuowen with admiration. When facing the demonic hand, Zhuowen was very calm from the beginning to the end. Such courage and grace filled Ziling's eyes with an indescribable charm. Inside the hall, Li Xinbing, Peng Li, Mi Yuanxi, and the others looked at Zhuowen with respect. Not only was this person powerful, but his temperament was also far better than theirs. At this moment, the unwillingness in their hearts had also vanished into thin air. They finally knew how big the gap between them and this young man was. I'm not sure either. I remember Pei Shanglong said that as long as we can obtain the hall, we can survive by staying in the hall. That's why I wanted to give it a try. The hall in this small world is indeed extraordinary. Even if the evil spirit in the darkness is very strong, the hall is enough to protect the safety of the hall. This should be what Pei Shanglong meant when he said that. Zhuowen said calmly. Everyone fell silent and looked at the puddles of blood outside the hall that had yet to dry up. They also understood the meaning behind Zhuowen's words. The hall was indeed safe, but outside the hall was not as safe as in the darkness. Even if the hall's light source covered an area of 1 mile, the light outside the hall could indeed disperse some of the weaker evil spirits. However, it could not stop the truly powerful evil spirits. The cultivators outside the hall would still die. It had to be said that there was no loophole in this trial. Apart from Ma Junfeng and the others, as long as they stayed within 1 mile of the palace, they would be able to survive the terrifying darkness. Unfortunately, other than inside the hall, the terror of darkness was everywhere. Their lives had nowhere to hide, and in the end there was only death. Mei Yuanxi was so scared that his back was drenched in cold sweat. Fortunately, he had an idea and reached an agreement with Li Xinbing before entering the hall. Otherwise, his fate would not be much better than Ma Junfeng's. At the same time, Mi Yuanxi also felt some sorrow in his heart. Other than the two who had entered the palace, the rest of his companions had also been killed by the evil spirit and became food for the evil spirit. Zhuowen strode out of the hall and arrived in front of the demonic hand. This demonic hand was extremely huge. It was about 30 to 40 feet long and about 1 meter thick. At this moment, dense, surging demonic chi was emanating from the surface of the demonic hand, and the arm was still twitching and struggling. The 5 fingers of a huge palm that was like a cattail leaf fan moved together and slowly crawled towards the light source that was 1 li away. However, the light source in the palace suppressed the demonic hand greatly. The demonic hand's crawling speed could be described as the speed of a turtle. Zhuowen sneered and slashed out a spiritual sword intent from his forehead. The purple gold divine sword whistled through the air and pierced into the center of the demonic hand without hesitation. The demonic hand struggled in pain, flailing wildly. However, the purple gold divine sword was rooted to the ground, nailing the demonic hand to the ground. Zhuowen circled the demonic hand and carefully observed it for a while. He thought that if he could refine this demonic hand, his cultivation would increase greatly. The Universal Sutra of Heaven and Earth was Zhuowen's secret, so he naturally couldn't refine this demonic hand immediately. With a wave of his sleeve, he kept the demonic hand into the great world. Everyone in the palace saw Zhuowen's actions, but no one said anything. It was all thanks to Zhuowen that this demonic hand was severed here. In their eyes, this was Zhuowen's spoils of war, and there was no dispute about it. After putting away the demonic hand, Zhuowen entered the palace as if nothing had happened and sat cross-legged on the futon in front of the headless statue again. Ziling blushed and sat next to Zhuowen. Her body intentionally moved closer to Zhuowen. Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen's back, and her beautiful eyes flickered. Suddenly, she gritted her teeth and walked in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen looked at the beautiful female cultivator in front of him in confusion and asked, "Is something the matter, fellow Taoist Li?" Although Zhuowen rarely interacted with Li Xinbing, he had learned of her name from their previous conversation. "Brother Daowen, you also know that this entrance trial is not simple. The longer we stay here, the more terrifying the darkness around us will be. If we want to continue living here, we have to fight for the light source with others. Only then can we survive." Before Li Xinbing could finish, she was interrupted by Zhuowen. He looked at Li Xinbing indifferently and said, "Fellow Taoist Li, are you saying that you want to rely on me?" Li Xinbing was stunned and her heart twitched. How did Daowen know that she wanted to rely on him? Li Xinbing forced a smile and said, "Brother Daowen, you might have misunderstood. I plan to join forces with you. After all, the more people there are, the more strength there is. Joining forces is beneficial to both of us." Zhuowen shook his head instead and said, "All of you are too weak. Joining forces with me is a burden to me, and you'll only drag me down. Unless you rely on me, perhaps I will protect you." Li Xinbing looked at Zhuowen's matter-of-fact expression and felt an unknown anger rise in her heart. She admitted that Zhuowen was indeed stronger than everyone else in the palace, but in her opinion, he was only slightly stronger. After all, she was a powerhouse at the late stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. No matter how good Li Xinbing's temper was, she could not help but feel angry when she was called a burden. However, Li Xinbing suppressed her anger and said coldly, "Since Brother Daowen is not sincere, then forget about the alliance." After saying that, Lin Xinbing returned to her seat and sulked alone. Ziling carefully glanced at Li Xinbing, who was not looking too good, and said in a low voice, "Brother Daowen, I think Sister Li's suggestion is not bad. We can definitely join forces with them." Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Sister Ziling, you don't understand. Li Xinbing's strength is not bad, but in my opinion, they are useless. Moreover, bringing this group of people is a burden in itself." Since Zhuowen had already said so much, Ziling knew that there was no point in continuing. She simply shut her mouth and began to cultivate in silence. Chapter 3900. In the middle of the night, the darkness in the outside world grew thicker. Ghostly wails and howls resounded in the depths of the darkness. Inside the hall was quiet. All the cultivators were either cultivating or sitting cross-legged in meditation. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. With a thought, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared on the spot, entering the hidden great world. Inside the great world, life was full of vitality. Everything was revived, the land was vast, and the mountains were tall. Ever since the great world had merged with the supreme word stone, it had become stronger and more complete. Not only had the great world's barrier become stronger, but the laws inside the great world had also become more complete and advanced. As for Xiao He and the other 2 divine swords, they had benefited greatly from cultivating in the great world. Their cultivation speed was extremely fast. Zhuowen landed in a valley. The devil hand he had just collected was inside this valley. When Zhuowen stepped into the valley, he immediately felt an extremely dense and terrifying devil chi. Zhuowen frowned slightly and rushed into the valley. Immediately, he saw the devil hand nailed to the ground by the purple-gold divine sword in the center of the valley. Monstrous devil chi erupted from the devil hand. This devil chi rose and intertwined, revealing billowing black devil flames. Under the burning of the devil flames, the solid barrier around the valley turned into nothingness. Moreover, the devil hand struggled fiercely, and its devil aura soared to the sky. The purple-gold divine sword trembled continuously, and it was beginning to lose its oppression of the devil hand. Zhuan's expression changed slightly. He sent out several divine soul sword intents to completely suppress the devil hand. However, the devil hand was indeed fierce. Although it was nailed to the ground by several divine soul sword intents, it still struggled with all its might, and its devil aura was vast and mighty. Zhuan's gaze turned solemn. He knew that the reason why the devil hand was so quiet in the hall was mainly because it was suppressed by the light source. Now that there was no light source in the great world, it was unable to suppress the devil hand. Therefore, the devil hand was acting so unscrupulously. See if I don't refine you to death. Zhuan harumphed coldly. Boundless grand mist god force surged out from his body and turned into purple-gold flames that burned fiercely. In the blink of an eye, the purple-gold flames enveloped the devil hand. After being enveloped by the purple-gold flames, the devilish hand, which had been struggling fiercely, immediately stiffened. Then, it twitched violently, as if in fear, trying to break free from the purple-gold divine sword and escape the purple-gold flames. Unfortunately, the purple-gold divine sword had nailed the demon hand so firmly that it had nowhere to hide. Creak, creak, creak. As the purple-gold flames continued to burn, the demonic hand emitted a strange sound. The demonic aura on its surface was gradually refined, turning into a vast and righteous aura that surged into Zhuan's body. After the awe-inspiring vital energy entered Zhuan's body, it transformed into the inherent divine power in his body, constantly increasing Zhuan's cultivation. After an unknown period of time, the demonic hand was completely refined by Zhuan, turning into the vast and righteous aura inside Zhuan's body. Zhuan stood up abruptly, and cracking noises came from his body. His aura rose steadily, becoming vast and boundless. I really didn't expect a mere demonic hand to contain such a vast amount of energy. Zhuan's eyes shone brightly. Although he had yet to break through, he was not far from it. If he could refine this demonic hand, his cultivation would advance another step from the early 5-element transformation realm to the mid-stage 5-elements transformation realm. Zhuan lamented inwardly, but he knew that this was the arm of a warrior realm demonic spirit. Huang Xiaolong's current strength was not enough to deal with a demonic spirit of this level, not to mention refining it. With his current strength, he should be able to deal with a warrior realm demonic spirit, but a warrior realm demonic spirit was still lacking. However, Zhuan also knew that as long as he continued to cultivate and improve his strength, he would not be afraid of a warrior realm demonic spirit. After all, he had the universal scripture of heaven and earth, and the vast and righteous aura was the nemesis of demonic spirits. The darkness of this small world was probably the most suitable place for him to cultivate. When Zhuan left the small world, he found that the outside world was already bright. There was no one in the hall, not even Zi Lingbang. Suddenly, a wretched figure flew in from outside the palace and smashed into a wall inside the palace. Zhuan looked over and found that it was a rather beautiful female cultivator. He could tell at a glance that this female cultivator was Li Xinbing's companion. Cough, cough, cough. The female cultivator coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood. Suddenly, she saw Zhuan in the hall and was pleasantly surprised. Senior brother Daowan, please save senior sister Li and the others, the female cultivator said with a pale face. Zhuan took out a divine healing pill, threw it to the female cultivator, and walked straight out of the hall. After the female cultivator fell into the hall, Zhuan's divine will had already spread out, and he could clearly see the scene outside. He saw Li Xinbing, Mi Yuanci, and the others fighting with a group of people outside. There were also more than 10 people in this group, and the leader was a young man with a haughty expression. This young man was not tall, and he was even a little short. His appearance was also somewhat ugly. However, this short young man's cultivation was not ordinary, and he was able to completely suppress both Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanci by himself. A cultivator at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage, Zhuowen muttered to himself. He could tell at a glance that this short young man's cultivation was higher than Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanci's. He was at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage. Moreover, the group of people brought by this short young man was stronger than Li Xinbing's group. There were even 2 late-stage 5 elements transformation stage cultivators among them. Li Xinbing's people were beaten back repeatedly, and many of them were seriously injured. There were even some who died. Zhuowen did not care whether Li Xinbing and the others lived or died. After all, he had nothing to do with Li Xinbing and the others. He naturally did not want to get involved in their affairs. His eyes were like torches as he scanned the battlefield, trying to find Ziling. Soon, he found Ziling tied up with a whip by a late-stage 5 elements transformation stage female cultivator. She was standing on top of a tall boulder, coldly looking down on the battlefield. Zhuowen's appearance naturally attracted everyone's attention. The short young man glanced at Zhuowen and found that he was only at the early stage of the 5 elements transformation stage. Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanci, on the other hand, were pleasantly surprised. After a night, Zhuowen suddenly disappeared. They thought that he had gone out early in the morning. Then, this short young man brought people to snatch the headless statue in their temple. Thus, the 2 sides clashed, and a great battle broke out. Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanci, on the other hand, were secretly complaining. Although this short young man did not look like much, his strength was indeed very strong. He was actually at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage. They were completely at a disadvantage, and it would not be long before they were defeated by this person. Brother Daowen, can you lend us a hand? Xinbing will repay you generously after this. Li Xinbing said, asking for help from Zhuowen. The short young man looked coldly at Zhuowen and sneered. Li Xinbing, have you been beaten silly? You're actually asking for help from an early stage 5 elements transformation stage trash? No matter how many trash like him come, I'll kill them all. The short young man's voice was not soft. It resounded like thunder around the great Rift Valley, and everyone heard it clearly. Chapter 3901. The short youth looked at the smile on Zhuowen's face, and for some reason, he felt a chill in his heart. It was as if a cold blade was pressed against his neck, causing his body to tremble involuntarily. How strange. How can a mere 5 elements transformation trash give me such a feeling? Is it just my imagination? The short youth felt that he had lost face after being frightened by Zhuowen. Now, Zhuowen had stopped again and questioned him. He felt that he had lost face and felt very uncomfortable. Trash, you have guts. How dare you talk back to me? An even more terrifying aura burst out from the short young man's body. Blazing golden light dissipated as he suddenly threw out 2 punches. Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanci, who had been attacking the short youth, were shocked. They barely managed to block the short youth's terrifying punches, but with a groan, they spat out mouthfuls of blood and were forced to retreat. Trash, get over here and accept your death. The short youth hovered in midair, ignoring Mi Yuanci and Li Xinbing, who were pushed back by him. His cold gaze landed on Zhuowen. Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanci had retreated quite a distance. When they saw that the short youth did not chase after them, they heaved a sigh of relief. The short youth was at the peak of the 5 elements transformation stage, and his battle prowess was extremely strong. 1 against 2, he could completely suppress them. They were very clear that if they continued to fight, the 2 of them would undoubtedly lose within 100 rounds. And the result of defeat was death. When they saw that the short youth had started to target Zhuowen because of 1 sentence, they were ecstatic, but at the same time nervous. They knew that Zhuowen was very strong, stronger than both of them. However, the short youth was not weak either. He could suppress both of them without suffering any injuries. What they were worried about was whether Zhuowen was a match for this short youth. Zhuowen stood in place without moving. Instead, he stared coldly at the short youth. The killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. Initially, he did not want to meddle in other people's business. The battle between this short young man, Li Xinbing, and Mei Yuanxi had nothing to do with him. But this short youth actually dared to provoke him. That was simply courting death. Now, I'll give you a chance to live. Come in front of me, slap yourself 100 times, break one of your arms, kneel before me, and kowtow to admit your mistakes. Then, I'll let bygones be bygones and spare your life. Zhuowen stood tall, his tone terrifyingly calm. However, within the calmness, there was an extremely terrifying chill. He had already given the short youth a chance to live. It all depended on whether he would grasp this one and only opportunity. The short young man was stunned at first, then he laughed out loud. He turned to his companion and said, "This trash is still an idiot, right? He actually said that he would give me a chance to live. Don't you think it's funny?" The short young man's companions roared with laughter, mocking Zhuowen for his arrogance and overconfidence. Li Xinbing, Mei Yuanxi, and the rest looked on coldly. The short young man and his companions might not know Zhuowen's strength, but they knew it all too well. However, they also felt that Zhuowen was a little too arrogant. Although they knew that Zhuowen was strong, he was not strong enough to make the short youth kneel and injure himself to beg for his life. In their eyes, Zhuowen and the short youth's strength should be about the same. "Then you have no chance at all," Zhuowen said calmly. The short youth was extremely angry. This piece of trash, who was only at the initial stage of the 5-element transformation stage, was obviously trash in cultivation. How dare he act so high and mighty? Who gave him the courage and confidence? He wanted to crush this piece of trash's arrogance and confidence. "Die, you piece of trash!" The short youth roared angrily. His entire body emitted a blazing divine light that was difficult to look at. He was like a high and mighty god descending from the heavens. Rumble! The short youth threw out a punch that was like a rising sun. It came from afar and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. The terrifying aura caused the expressions of everyone in the surroundings to change drastically. Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanxi's faces were especially pale. They could not help but smile bitterly. They could feel that the short youth's furious punch was too terrifying. It was much more terrifying than when he fought with the two of them. If the short youth had fought them with such strength from the beginning, they would have been defeated long ago. It was obvious that the short youth had not used his full strength. Brother Daowen might not necessarily be a match for him. Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanxi looked at each other and thought at the same time. Rumble! The short youth's punch was extremely fast. It landed on Zhuowen's face in the blink of an eye. The golden light emitted by the fist was too blazing. They only saw that after the golden light engulfed Zhuowen's figure, all they could see was gold. They couldn't see anything else or any other color. Senior Brother Daowen, on a rock far behind, Ziling, who was being held in the hand of a female cultivator, saw the blazing fist light engulf Zhuowen. Her pretty face turned pale, and she could not help but cry out. "Haha, this is Senior Brother Nie's strongest abijina, the divine fist of the great sun. He once killed a cultivator at the pinnacle of the 5 elements transformation stage with a single punch. Your lover's cultivation is too low. He has no chance of survival." Although the female cultivator was not very pretty, she had a curvaceous figure and was very hot. She held Ziling in her hand and said proudly. Ziling, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. She stood there motionless, as if she had been petrified. When the blazing fist radiance reached its peak, it actually turned into a huge sun that fell from the sky in the Great Rift Valley. It emitted rolling golden flames and flew wantonly. Suddenly, a powerful sword intent that was different from the sun burst forth from within the great sun. This sword intent was full of bravado and sharpness. It carried an unparalleled sharpness as it soared into the sky, covering the terrifying sun that was falling from the sky. Kacha! a mysterious purple color appeared within the sword intent. This purple color became more and more intense until it overshadowed the golden color of the great sun. Then, the purple energy turned into a sharp divine sword and pierced through the center of the great sun. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, the great sun that seemed like it would never be extinguished crumbled inch by inch, shattering into countless golden rays. As for the mysterious purple sword, after piercing through the sun, it streaked across the sky and instantly shot towards the short youth. Under the horrified gaze of the short youth, it pierced through the center of his eyebrows. Then, without losing any momentum, it shot towards the distant horizon and turned into an imperceptible purple light spot. Thump! The short young man's expression completely froze. His body fell from mid-air in a sorry state, and a dull thud could be heard from his body. The crowd was silent. Everyone looked at the short youth's corpse in disbelief. He was a pinnacle 5-element transformation stage cultivator, and he was able to suppress Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanxi, 2 late-stage 5-element transformation stage cultivators. However, at that moment, a strange purple light had pierced through his forehead and killed him before their very eyes. Chapter 3902. I'm not a ruthless person. This person insulted me, but I don't intend to kill him. I also gave him a chance, but unfortunately, he didn't know how to cherish it. Zhuowen spoke slowly. His words resounded in everyone's ears like a sudden clap of thunder. Everyone laughed bitterly in their hearts, thinking that Zhuowen's words were no different from not saying anything. His request was too humiliating, and the short youth was also a young master. He was proud and arrogant, so naturally, it was impossible for him to compromise. The female cultivator holding Ziling was still talking, but when she saw the body of the short youth on the ground, her voice came to an abrupt end, and her jaw almost fell to the ground. Ziling, who was originally in a daze, suddenly became lively, and her eyes were filled with excitement. Brother Daowen won. Ha, he won. Ziling almost shouted in joy, and the joy on her pretty face could not be concealed. Sister, Ziling is my companion. How long do you plan to hold her hostage? Zhuowen's eyes fell on the female cultivator standing on the rock, and a bright smile appeared on his lips. But in the eyes of the female cultivator, this smile was like the smile of a demon, and she could not help but scream. Then, she grabbed Ziling's neck and said coldly, "Don't come over. If you dare come over, I'll turn this bitch into a corpse immediately." Zhuowen frowned slightly and said lightly, "Let go of Sister Ziling, and I won't make things difficult for you. I'll let you and your companions leave here." The dozen or so people brought by the short youth all retreated behind the female cultivator and looked at Zhuowen with fear in their eyes. The female cultivator recovered and saw that Zhuowen cared so much about Ziling. Her eyes were full of resentment. "Hand over the headless idol of your temple, and then kill yourself in front of me. Maybe I'll let this bitch go." Unfortunately, as soon as the female cultivator spoke, she found that Zhuowen's figure had disappeared before her eyes like a ghost. By the time she regained her senses, Zhuowen had already passed by her, and his sword finger had already pressed against her glabella. A dense and powerful purple energy burst out from the sword finger and penetrated deep into her soul. It exploded with a terrifying sword intent and shattered her soul. "Don't push your luck. There's a limit to my patience, and I won't be kind every time." Zhuowen's indifferent voice sounded in the female cultivator's ears. The female cultivator's eyes were filled with regret. Then, she fell to the ground and lost all signs of life. "Junior Ziling, are you all right?" Zhuowen grabbed Ziling's waist and used his divine power to break the barrier around her body. He asked with concern. Ziling was still in shock. At this moment, when Zhuowen asked her, she realized that their posture was slightly ambiguous. She quickly stood up and quietly distanced herself from Zhuowen. With her heart beating wildly, she said, "Senior Brother Daowen, I'm fine. Thank you for saving me this time. We're companions. I said that I'd take you through this entrance trial smoothly. Of course, I won't go back on my word. Zhuowen smiled. Ziling looked at Zhuowen's smile in a daze. At first, she didn't care about Zhuowen's big words. However, after these few battles, she deeply realized that Zhuowen indeed had the strength and confidence to do so. He really did have the strength to help her through this trial. When the short young man and the female cultivator died, their companions all turned pale and began to quietly retreat in fear. "Did I say you could go?" Zhuowen suddenly shouted. These cultivators immediately knelt down and begged Zhuowen for mercy. "Don't worry, I'm not a bloodthirsty person. As long as you do me a favor, I'll let you go immediately," Zhuowen said calmly. The rest of the people naturally nodded. After beating around the bush, Zhuowen also learned the specific location of the temple they occupied from this group of people. However, when they left the temple and attacked Zhuowen's temple, they had already put away the headless idols in the temple. They stayed in the temple for a night and also saw that the temple's light source was provided by the headless idols. If they wanted to survive in this small world for a month, they had to fight for as many headless idols as possible to strengthen their light source so that they could survive in the increasingly terrifying darkness. Zhuowen finally found out that the headless idols were hidden on the female cultivator's body. He couldn't help but be surprised. He thought that the idols would be kept by the short young man, but it seemed that he was wrong. He took off the female cultivator's spiritual ring and found a headless idols inside. He nodded and let the rest of the cultivators leave. "Senior Brother Daowen, you can't let these people go just like that. After they leave, they will definitely join other factions and survive in this small world. This is like letting a tiger return to the mountain and strengthen the other factions." Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanxi quickly came up and persuaded Zhuowen to kill the rest of the cultivators. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Even if they join other factions, they won't be a threat to me. Why should I waste my energy to kill them?" Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanxi were helpless. They knew that it would be useless to persuade Zhuowen, so they tactfully kept silent. Zhuowen took out the headless idols he took from the female cultivator and placed them in the temple. He remembered Pei Shanglong's words. The more nights he stayed here, the more terrifying the darkness would be. Tonight would be the second night. He wanted to see how much more terrifying the darkness would be compared to the first night. At the same time, he saw through the jade slip that nearly 30 of the 108 light spots on the jade slip had disappeared. This meant that 30 of the headless idols in the temples had been taken away. Zhuowen shook his head. It was only the second day, and the competition was already so intense. He suspected that the 10 temples would be decided in 10 days, not 30 days. Moreover, there might be some sinister experts who would collect even more headless idols, leaving no chance for the cultivators in the other temples. Nominally, only 10 headless idols were needed to pass 30 days. However, in reality, the number of temples that would survive would be less than 10. Zhuowen returned to the hall and silently sat cross-legged before he started to meditate and cultivate. Although the darkness in this small world was terrifying, the chaotic energy was much denser than the outside world. It was a holy land for cultivation. After Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanxi returned to the temple, they intentionally or unintentionally tried to get closer to Ziling. Chapter 3903. As night fell, the darkness sank into the earth. Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanxi both heaved a sigh of relief. They were worried that other cultivators would come to snatch the headless statue from them. However, after waiting for an entire day in fear, no other cultivators came to the Great Rift Valley where their temple was located. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The darkness sank into the earth, and a strange black wind blew around them. Amidst the whistling of the wind, there were also some ear-piercing screeches. These sharp sounds were the ear-piercing sounds of demonic charm rampage. Zhuowen opened his eyes. Vast amounts of Hong Meng divine power condensed in his eyes, making them as hot as the sun. When his gaze fell on the darkness, his gaze became rather serious. He could see that there were more evil spirits in the darkness around the palace than last night. It seemed that Pei Shanglong's words were true. The darkness in this small world was indeed getting more terrifying by the day. From Zhuan's point of view, the darkness today was indeed stronger than last night, but not by much. Even if it was a headless statue, it was still very safe hiding in the temple. Of course, judging from the trend of the increase day by day, the surrounding power of darkness would probably become even more terrifying after 5 or 6 days. Just the headless statue alone might not be able to resist the invasion of the darkness at that time. Suddenly, Zhuan stood up and took down a headless statue beside him. When everyone saw Zhuan's action, they all stood up and looked at Zhuan nervously. They didn't know what Zhuan wanted to do with the statue. Senior brother Daowen, Ziling asked doubtfully. I plan to enter the darkness to take a look, Zhuan said calmly. What? Everyone was shocked. They felt that Zhuan was overestimating his strength. They knew how terrifying the darkness was. Even if they knew that Zhuan was strong enough, they didn't think that Zhuan could return safely from the darkness. Junior sister Ziling, don't worry. I'm taking a headless statue. With the headless statue as a light source, the things in the darkness can't do anything to me. Zhuan smiled and comforted Ziling with a few words, then left the hall. Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanxi opened their mouths, but didn't say anything. This headless statue was originally stolen by Zhuan. It didn't belong to them. They had nothing to say about Zhuan taking it away. They weren't worried about Zhuan's life, but that if Zhuan died in the darkness, the headless statue would be lost. This was a huge loss for them. After watching Zhuan leave, Ziling worriedly said in a low voice, Senior brother, Daowen should be fine. Zhuan carried the headless stone statue and quickly rushed into the darkness. Ow, ow, ow. The moment he entered the darkness, countless evil spirits pounced on him like crazy. However, Zhuan immediately took out the headless idol. Blazing rays of light shot out like a blazing sun. The evil spirits that were originally rushing over were burned by the light and sizzled. One after another, they retreated back into the darkness, not daring to come within 1 li of Zhuan. Of course, some of the weaker evil spirits were directly disintegrated under the light of the headless statue. After a while, Zhuan passed through the Rift Valley and arrived at the entrance. He looked at the Rift Valley and could vaguely see the hazy light emitted by the temple in the depths of the Rift Valley. After Zhuan looked away, he jumped up and left the Rift Valley. He ran for another few hundred miles and came to the bottom of a cliff. The reason why he carried the statue out was not to explore the darkness, but to cultivate the universal scripture of heaven and earth. Originally, he could survive in the darkness without relying on the statue. However, he did not dare to enter the darkness without relying on the statue. This was too shocking for Li Xinbing and the others. There was a high chance that the universal scripture of heaven and earth on him would be exposed. Of course, the darkness in this small world was more terrifying than the outside world. If Zhuan did not rely on the headless statue, he would still be in trouble if he encountered an evil spirit. It would be much safer to bring the headless idol along. Ow, ow! Under the cliff, evil spirits were everywhere, running rampant. Zhuan carried the statue and walked to the bottom of the cliff. The surrounding evil spirits let out mournful shrieks as they all fled. Boom! Zhuan placed the statue on the open space under the cliff. Suddenly, there was a dull thud from the ground, and the ground seemed to shake several times. The headless statue did not look very tall, but it was extremely heavy. Even with Zhuan's strength, he was still a little out of breath after running for so long while carrying the headless statue. Zhuan sat cross-legged under the statue. After adjusting his breath for a while, he stood up again. His eyes were like torches, shooting out bright divine light as he looked into the darkness. Most of the evil spirits around him were of the fighting level. He was not a discoverer-level evil spirit. This evil spirit was much stronger than the fighting-level evil spirits. Naturally, there were fewer of them. Zhuan's eyes flickered. He had never tried to fight a fighting-level evil spirit alone. In fact, he did not have a clear idea of how strong a fighting-level evil spirit was. However, from Prado's performance, he could see that a peak fighting-level evil spirit should be around the early stage of the God realm. Although there were many fighting-level evil spirits in the darkness, there were not many peak fighting-level evil spirits. Moreover, Zhuan's own nature energy was very good at restraining evil spirits. Although the fighting-level evil spirits were strong, they were still restrained by the nature energy in his body. Thinking of this, Zhuan slowly walked to the edge of the light source. His eyes fell on the evil spirit closest to him. This evil spirit had been wandering around the edge of the light source. Its eyes were greedily staring at Zhuan. Now, when it saw the human in front of it walk directly to it, it became extremely irritable. Its blood-red eyes looked coldly at Zhuan. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as if it was going to swallow Zhuan at any time. However, it was still afraid of the light source and did not dare to enter it. Zhuan grinned. Suddenly, his right hand turned into a claw. He reached into the darkness and grabbed the evil spirit's neck. This evil spirit obviously did not expect that this lowly human could see its specific position in the darkness. It was absent-minded for a moment and forgot to break free from Zhuan's right hand. It was this moment of absent-mindedness that allowed Zhuan to pull the evil spirit into the light source with his right hand. Sizzle, sizzle. Suddenly, the evil spirit's body emitted terrifying green smoke. Its body gradually became transparent. The evil spirit struggled violently. Chapter 3904. Looks like I made the right choice in bringing the statue. With such a wonderful effect, it can save me a lot of energy to refine the evil spirits. Zhuan muttered to himself, and his eyes shone with excitement. The effect of the battle-grade evil spirits was indeed not bad. After refining them, he could clearly feel that the god force in his body had increased by a lot. According to his estimation, if he refined another dozen or so battle-grade evil spirits, he would be able to smoothly break through to the 5 elements transformation mid-stage. Zhuan's spirit rose, and he came to another place at the edge of the light source. Then he grabbed another evil spirit that was pacing back and forth at the edge of the light source and dragged it into the light source. This evil spirit was like a live fish caught by a fisherman, screaming and struggling nonstop. With his first experience, Zhuan could be said to be an experienced veteran. He firmly grabbed the evil spirit's neck and did not let go. Moreover, the god force in his body poured out. In a short while, the second evil spirit was completely refined by him. Next, Zhuan followed the same pattern, and soon, he refined 5 more evil spirits. Just as Zhuan was about to grab the next evil spirit, he discovered that there were no more evil spirits around the light source. He saw that several hundred meters away from the edge of the light source, there were evil spirits staring at Zhuan with vigilance. Zhuan could see the fear and alarm in these evil spirits' eyes. How could a mere human be so terrifying as to eat their companions? Was he still human? After all, these evil spirits were battle-grade evil spirits, and their intelligence was already very high. They naturally saw through the trick and knew that this hateful human was tempting them. They were not idiots, and naturally, they would not fall for it again. Zhuan shook his head helplessly. He also knew that this kind of trick would not work every time. Thus, he took a step out of the light source's range and stepped into the darkness. When the evil spirits that were hiding in the distance saw that Zhuan actually dared to step into the darkness, their bright eyes emitted a light that could not be ignored. Then, these evil spirits let out terrifying roars and rushed over. In an instant, they rushed in front of Zhuan, and a fishy smell filled the air. Zhuan sneered as boundless grand mist god force surged out from his body like an ocean. Then his feet moved in a mysterious way, like a fish swimming in the water, flickering in the surroundings. After dodging the first wave of attacks from these evil spirits, he moved like lightning. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed the evil spirit closest to him. The evil spirit struggled like a fish in water, but Zhuowen's gaze was cold. Vast grand mist god force poured out from his palm, turning into purple gold flames that swiftly refined the evil spirit in his hand. The evil spirit did not last for long. With a miserable cry, it completely turned into a strand of violet gold energy that surged into Zhuowen's body, becoming a part of Zhuowen. Zhuowen's movement technique was infused with the power of the Grand Word Stone. It was already much faster than cultivators of the same level. Coupled with the strange and tricky movement technique, even a peak yin-yang transformation cultivator might not necessarily be faster than him. Zhuowen turned into a strange purple-colored phantom as he shuttled through the evil spirits. Every time there was a purple flash, Zhuowen would ruthlessly grab an evil spirit in the palm of his hand. He would swallow and spit out powerful god force, completely refining the evil spirit. As the number of evil spirits he refined increased, Zhuozheng's aura became more and more powerful, and his refining speed also became faster and faster. After Zhuowen refined the 15th evil spirit, he felt his entire body warm up. A vast and surging energy filled his limbs and bones, breaking through all the meridians in his body and rushing straight to his Tianling acupoint. Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he suppressed the excitement in his heart. He knew that he had accumulated enough energy and could break through immediately. Roar, roar, roar. In the darkness, when the evil spirits saw that Zhuowen's figure was as fast as a ghost, they learned to be smart. They no longer split up and rushed out. Instead, they surrounded Zhuowen in a circular formation. This hateful human seemed to be able to restrain them. Therefore, they did not dare to fight alone and decided to cooperate to take down this human. Zhuowen snorted coldly. He clenched his right fist and punched out dozens of times. Every punch was filled with terrifying fist force. The vast grand mist god force turned into a sky full of fist shadows that swept out in all directions. The evil spirit's encirclement was instantly broken by the terrifying fist shadows. Zhuowen took advantage of this opportunity to rush through one of the gaps and leave the evil spirit's encirclement. He did not dare to stay in the encirclement for too long. After all, each of these evil spirits was at the battle realm. Their strength was monstrous and definitely not ordinary. If he stayed in the encirclement for too long, he was afraid that his life would be in danger. Zhuowen leaped a few times and rushed toward the headless statue's light source. However, when Zhuowen was about to enter the light source's range, his eyelids twitched. An extremely ominous feeling rose in his heart. Then, he suddenly changed his direction. With a twist of his waist, he rushed in a circle and rushed into the light source. The moment Zhuowen rushed into the light source, a huge palm that was several feet long swept out from the cliff and fiercely slammed into the path that Zhuowen originally took. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In an instant, countless cracks appeared on the ground at the edge of the light source. Violent tremors spread out in all directions. The surrounding earth quaked and the mountains swayed. It was very shocking. Zhuowen stared fixedly at the palm, and the hair on his body stood on end. His gaze followed the palm and fell on the cliff. He saw a pair of scarlet eyes light up in the cliff, like a pair of huge blood-red lanterns. This pair of blood-red eyes slowly looked down at Zhuowen coldly and said indifferently, "What a cunning human. You actually dodged my attack." This evil spirit was dozens of feet tall, and its whole body was covered with hard rock-like scales. These scales were almost exactly the same as the rocks on the cliff. It stuck to the cliff as if it was one with the cliff. Zhuowen did not see from the beginning that there was actually an evil spirit hiding on the cliff. Moreover, this evil spirit's aura was extremely vast and terrifying. It was far beyond the battle realm evil spirit. It was probably another battle realm evil spirit. Just now, this evil spirit had been hiding in the cliff. The moment Zhuowen returned to the light source was when it was the most relaxed, and it brazenly attacked. If it were not for Zhuowen's divine sense, that was far superior to that of ordinary cultivators, he might have been hit by the palm. Even if he did not die, he would have been seriously injured. The evil spirit on the cliff coldly looked down at Zhuowen and did not continue to attack. Zhuowen knew that although the battle realm evil spirit was powerful, it was still afraid of the light source emitted by the headless statue. After he had no more worries, he no longer paid attention to this evil spirit. Instead, he sat cross-legged next to the statue and began to prepare to break through to the middle stage of the five elements transformation stage. In the middle of the night, the aura in Zhuowen's body suddenly turned into a pillar of qi that soared into the sky. And in his body, there were strange banging sounds, as if there was an oven that was constantly burning. The surrounding temperature also rose to an extremely terrifying level because of this. And behind Zhuowen, the power of the five elements surged out and formed a strange cycle in the void behind him. Chapter 3905. The five-element ring behind Zhuowen began to spin faster and faster. As it spun, the volume of the five-element ring actually doubled in size. On the surface of the five-element ring, there were 5 different colors, mixed with purple and gold. The light was overflowing, as if it was going to break through the darkness. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes, and the five-element ring behind him suddenly dissipated. He slowly stood up, and his eyes revealed a look of surprise. I finally broke through to the middle stage of the five elements transformation stage. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He could feel that after the breakthrough, his strength had increased by quite a bit. Zhuowen slowly raised his head and looked at the cliff behind him. There was a pair of blood-red eyes there. Zhuowen's gaze burned with a towering will to fight. The owner of the blood-red eyes also noticed the battle intent in Zhuowen's eyes. It slowly narrowed its eyes and said with a little anger, "Puny human, you have guts. How dare you look at me with such eyes? In your eyes, we cultivators are your food. But in my eyes, you all are my food." Zhuowen grinned and said, "Boom, boom, boom." The evil spirit in the cliff let out an angry howl, and its huge body suddenly rushed out of the cliff. The cliff shattered into countless pieces, falling from above and hitting the ground with a dull sound. Many of the double-level evil spirits around the cliff let out sharp screams and immediately fled far away. They trembled as they looked at the enormous evil spirit that came out of the cliff. Zhuowen silently looked at the evil spirit, and only then did he see the specific appearance of this evil spirit. This evil spirit's appearance was like a rock with protruding pieces, and it was dozens of feet tall. Its eyes were incomparably scarlet, and at first glance, it looked like a stone giant. Zhuowen's expression was extremely solemn. This evil spirit's aura was extremely vast, and it was not weaker than the pig-head evil spirit last night. If Zhuowen had not cultivated the universal scripture of heaven and earth, he would not have dared to challenge this evil spirit. The fighting-level evil spirit was no longer a threat to him, so he planned to challenge the fighting-level evil spirit to verify the extent of his current strength. "Puny human, get out of the light source and die." The stone giant looked at the headless statue with fear and did not dare to get too close. He roared at Zhuowen. "Just what I want." Zhuowen smiled. The moment he smiled, he took a step forward, and the surging power of the five elements surged out of his body like a vast ocean, pouring out in torrents. The surging power of the five elements condensed in the void behind him, and it turned into a huge five-element ring. The five-element ring spun rapidly, bursting with colorful light that spread out in all directions. A terrifying aura spread out along with the light like a vast ocean. After feeling the terrifying aura, the stone giant's eyes could not help but focus. He said in a low voice, "Your aura. It's not the aura of a normal practitioner, and it's mixed with an aura that I hate very much. Are you from the exorcist family?" Speaking of this, The stone giant's voice was a little unsteady. He obviously did not like people from the exorcist family. Zhuowen sneered and did not intend to answer the stone giant's words. He bounced his legs, and like an arrow, he rushed toward the stone giant. Humph! Exorcist family? So what? I'll kill one if one comes, and two if two come. I'll kill a pair. The stone giant's voice was as loud as a bell, and it suddenly spread out. Then he raised his fist, which was as thick as a small hill, and smashed it toward Zhuowen. Whoosh! Whoosh! The violent sound of the wind continued to resound. The surrounding air seemed to be torn into countless pieces. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Zhuowen was not afraid. He grabbed the huge 5-element wheel behind him and fiercely swung it. Boom! The huge fist force and the 5-element wheel collided, and terrifying energy ripples burst out. These energy ripples were like countless fireworks, bursting and spreading in all directions. In the deep darkness, it was so gorgeous and colorful. Zhuowen let out a muffled groan as he flew backwards and smashed into a cliff behind him. The stone giant, on the other hand, kept retreating, and his body was extremely unstable. Zhuowen came out of the gap between the rocks and laughed with bright eyes. I thought you were very powerful, but it turns out that you're just so-so. Zhuowen was quite excited. He jumped up and attacked the stone giant. The 5-element ring had become his weapon, and he kept swinging it and smashing it down. The momentum was terrifying, and the power was monstrous. In his divine power, there was a strong power of the awe-inspiring righteousness, which was a natural restraint against evil spirits. Zhuowen's cultivation was not strong, but relying on the power of the awe-inspiring righteousness, an evil spirit at the cultivator level might not be able to kill him. Bang! 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 Zhuowen was beaten back again and again by the stone giant, and he was almost covered with cuts and bruises. However, Zhuowen did not shrink back because of this. Instead, he became more and more courageous as he fought. Under Zhuowen's constant attacks, the stone giant was beaten back again and again, and some fine cracks appeared on the surface of its solid stone body. This puny human, the stone giant, looked at Zhuowen, who was like a cockroach that could not be killed, and his eyes were filled with shock and anger. This puny human's cultivation was obviously pathetically weak, but he could not kill him in one go. He also knew that this had something to do with the awe-inspiring righteousness in Zhuowen's body. This energy restrained him too much, so he did not dare to use his full strength to deal with this puny human. Boom! The stone giant suddenly threw a punch, and he was shocked to find that the slippery human in front of him did not dodge, and his abdomen was hit by his punch. Puffed. Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was extremely pale, but he grinned at the stone giant. Your arm is mine. Before the stone giant could react, a blazing purple-gold light gushed out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. From within the purple-gold light, purple-gold divine swords flew out. These purple-gold divine swords condensed into a giant sword that was dozens of feet long. The sword turned and slashed at the stone giant's right hand. Clang! 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 Countless sparks appeared, and the stone giant's right arm did not last long before it was cut off at the shoulder. The huge arm fell from midair and heavily smashed to the ground, causing the ground to tremble several times. After Zhuowen cut off the rock giant's right arm, he quickly put the arm into his great world. Then, without thinking, he fled into the headless idol's light source. When the stone giant came to his senses, his right arm was already cut off, and Zhuowen had already retreated to the headless idol's side. Ah, despicable human, you! The stone giant was furious, and he let out an earth-shattering roar. He rushed toward Zhuowen, who was in the headless idol, as if he had lost his mind. This puny human had cut off his arm, and this was the humiliation of his life. However, when he stepped into the light source, his body began to emit a sizzling sound, and the surface of his body began to vaporize, as if he would be annihilated at any time by the light source. Chapter 3906. He had just taken a rock giant's punch, and his injuries had become extremely serious. He even felt that his internal organs were somewhat ruptured. In his current state, it was really difficult for him to withstand the rock giant's attack. However, when the rock giant was about to reach the headless idol, it quickly retreated and left the range of the light source in an instant. Despicable human, I will remember you. Don't let me see you in the future, or I will kill you. The rock giant flew away quickly, and its furious voice came from afar. Zhuowen sighed lightly. He slowly sat cross-legged next to the headless idol and began to meditate and recuperate. At the same time, he began to silently refine the arm of the rock giant that he had personally chopped off. After Zhuowen's cultivation had reached the middle stage of the 5 elements transformation, he knew that refining a warrior-level evil spirit would not improve his cultivation so much. Unless it was a peak warrior-level evil spirit, there would still be some benefits to his cultivation. Therefore, he placed his attention on the rock giant. At the same time, he also wanted to verify the extent of his current strength. After another 2 hours, Zhuowen found that the surrounding darkness was gradually thinning. He knew that the night was about to fade away. His injuries were slightly better, but now he looked quite miserable. His body was covered in blood, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His chest was especially obvious. This was the wound caused by the rock giant's punch. It was extremely terrifying. Even if Zhuowen's self-healing ability was very strong, the wound on his chest was not something that could be healed in a short period of time. As expected of a warrior-level evil spirit, I only refined an arm, and it gave me such a surge of energy. Zhuowen stood up. Although his external injuries looked quite terrible, in fact, his injuries were not as serious as they appeared. Furthermore, his cultivation had also improved. What a pity. If I could refine a warrior-level evil spirit, maybe I could break through again and reach the late stage of the 5 elements transformation. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He could not forget the rock giant from last night. He picked up the headless idol again and returned to the temple in the Great Rift Valley. When he returned to the temple, everyone in the temple was shocked. Zhuowen's body was covered in blood, and he looked extremely miserable. It was obvious that he was severely injured. Senior Brother Daowen, what happened to you? Ziling's beautiful eyes were filled with shock as she hurried forward to ask. Li Xinbing and Mi Yuanxi were also shocked. Zhuo Wen's performance had exceeded their expectations. His strength was extremely strong. They did not expect Zhuowen to be in such a sorry state while carrying the headless idol. Zhuowen smiled faintly and casually found an excuse to explain the injuries on his body. No one doubted him. Mei Yuanxi, this is our chance. Lin Xinbing's beautiful eyes flickered. She was truly moved by Mei Yuanxi's suggestion. Zhuowen was indeed powerful, and it would be beneficial for them to have him as their leader. More importantly, they had approached Zhuowen many times to ask him to join forces, but Zhuowen's attitude had always been non-committal. He even ignored them. This made them uncertain about Zhuowen's attitude. Therefore, they did not know when Zhuowen would abandon them. Because of this, the two of them were very wary of Zhuowen. If they were strong enough, they would have killed Zhuowen a long time ago. However, Zhuowen was too strong, and they did not dare to make a move. Now, Zhuowen was severely injured, and his strength was definitely declining. This was the best time for them to make a move. Li Xinbing looked at Ziling, who was sitting beside Zhuowen. She frowned and shook her head. Senior Mei, if Senior Dao really wanted to abandon us, he would have chased us out of the temple yesterday. But he didn't do that. Instead, he went his own way. I think he just wants to occupy a spot in the palace. As long as we don't provoke him, he will continue to guard this palace. You know, there are many cultivators stronger than us in this trial. Now that Senior Dao is stronger than us, and he did not attack us, he might be our only hope to pass this trial. Mei Yuanxi fell in a deep thought. He stared at Zhuowen's back, hesitated for a while, and finally gave up. Li Xinbing was right. Now is not the time for internal strife. They should be in the same boat. So what if they killed Zhuowen? Their strength was simply too weak. If they wanted to pass this trial smoothly, it would still be somewhat difficult. But if they followed Zhuowen, there might be a glimmer of hope. Sitting upright on the praying mat, the corners of Zhuo Wen's mouth curled into a smile. Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanci had used their consciousness to communicate, and he did not hear the contents of their conversation. However, he could clearly feel the killing intent released by the two of them. He was waiting. If the two of them made a move against him, he would immediately counterattack and kill both Li Xinbing and Mei Yuanci. Fortunately, the two of them retracted their killing intent after transmitting their voices. He knew that the two of them had retreated. Of course, to Zhuowen, it was a wise decision for them to retreat. Although he was injured internally, his strength was not affected by much. If these two people really joined hands to attack him, he could kill them with a single slap. For the next 5 days, no other cultivators came to Zhuo Wen's hall in the Great Rift Valley. Zhuowen did not intend to go to the other temples to steal their headless idols. And every night, Zhuowen would take away one of the idols. They could feel that the evil spirits in the darkness could break through the light source and start to come into contact with the temple. On the 7th night, a demonic hand swept over and slammed into the temple. The top of the temple was knocked off, and many stones fell from the temple. Chapter 39:07. In the dark night, countless evil spirits were running amok, wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. Zhuowen carried the headless idol and returned to the cliff where he had been 5 days ago. "Bastard human, how dare you come here?" Suddenly, a pair of scarlet eyes lit up on the cliff. This pair of scarlet eyes stared coldly at Zhuowen, who was carrying the headless deity statue, not far away from the cliff. Zhuowen raised his head and looked at the rock giant hiding in the cliff. He grinned and said, "I've reached a bottleneck in my cultivation, and I urgently need the energy of a warrior-level evil spirit to break through. I've thought about it, and I don't seem to know any other warrior-level evil spirits in this strange world. You're the only one I'm familiar with. So I've come to find you." Roar! The rock giant was enraged. He let out a furious roar, and his voice spread out for thousands of miles around the cliff. "This human is too hateful. He actually treats me as prey. I'm so angry." Zhuowen stood next to the headless idol with a smile and continued, "Friend, if you're really angry, don't suppress your emotions. Come here, I'm standing right here. You can hit me as much as you want. I won't fight back." The rock giant roared again and again, but soon calmed down. He looked at the headless idol next to Zhuowen with fear. "This human is very cunning. He actually used my anger to lure me to the headless idol. Last time, when I lost my arm, I was so angry that I lost my mind. I suffered a loss from the headless idol. I won't suffer the same loss twice. Trash human, what else can you do besides relying on the headless idol? Do you dare to face me directly?" The rock giant provoked. "Haha, why wouldn't I dare?" Zhuowen sneered and put down the headless idol. Then he walked step by step to the cliff. After a while, he walked to the edge of the light source and looked up at the rock giant mockingly. The rock giant's scarlet eyes unconsciously shrank. He looked down at Zhuowen and still didn't move. The human in front of him was too cunning. He didn't have the confidence to make him stay, so he still didn't attack. "If you're so capable, why don't you just come to the cliff and stand in the light source? You're still afraid. What's the point?" The rock giant sneered. The rock giant thought that Zhuowen would refuse, but he didn't expect Zhuowen to agree without even thinking. Then, he walked out of the light source and slowly walked to the bottom of the cliff. Zhuowen's figure completely appeared in the darkness. Because the rock giant had released his aura, many of the evil spirits in the surroundings had already fled. Therefore, the surroundings of the cliff were much quieter and more spacious. When Zhuowen stopped and stood at the edge of the cliff, the rock giant let out a wild laugh. Then, he suddenly walked out of the cliff. A huge palm, like a small mountain, fell in front of Zhuowen. "Haha, foolish human. You actually dare to come before me. Today, I will completely destroy you, you scum." The rock giant laughed heartily, his scarlet eyes filled with rage and pleasure. In his eyes, this palm strike was sufficient to completely crush Zhuo when into powder, and it was sufficient to make him die beyond death. Zhuo sneered. He took a step forward, and his eyes were as calm as water. He also punched out. Terrifying fist force burst out with blazing grand mist divine power. Purple gold energy, like a blazing sun, soared into the sky and slammed into the rock giant's huge palm. Then, the rock giant was shocked to find that his palm force was broken. The terrifying fist intent forced him back a few steps, and he leaned against the cliff. Countless rocks fell from a cliff. Old friend, let me borrow your left arm. The rock giant leaned against the cliff. Before he could react, purple gold light burst out from Zhuowen's body like a god. Like a ghost, he appeared near the rock giant's left arm and grabbed it with both hands. The rock giant roared and swung his left arm with all his might. However, he was shocked to find that Zhuowen's hands were like a tight band. He firmly held his left arm, and the rock giant was unable to move. Then, the rock giant was horrified to find that streaks of purple gold sword intent surged out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. He remembered that night 5 days ago. This despicable human had also used this move to cut off his right arm. F***CK. Let go of me, you bastard. The rock giant was so scared that his heart was trembling. He quickly swung his left arm, trying to get rid of Zhuowen. Unfortunately, Zhuowen was like a sticky candy, clinging to the rock giant's left arm. Terrifying energy exploded from his tiny body, causing the rock giant's movements to be extremely stiff. He was almost frozen on the spot, unable to move at all. This despicable human is stronger than last time. The rock giant was shocked and angry at the same time. A chill rose in his heart, especially when he saw the purple gold light between Zhuowen's eyebrows become more and more intense. He was so horrified that he almost screamed out loud. Old friend, I've said that your left arm is mine. You'd better stop struggling. Zhuowen sneered. Streaks of soul sword intent burst out and condensed into a huge, terrifying purple gold sword in the air. Then it slashed down from the sky. Crack! The rock giant's left arm was cleanly cut off. The huge rock arm fell to the ground like a small mountain, causing the ground to tremble a few times. Zhuowen landed on the ground and neatly put his left arm into the macro world. Then, he quickly escaped into the light source. However, after running a few steps, he found that the rock giant was not fooled and was chasing after him. He immediately looked back in surprise. Then he saw that the rock giant looked like he wanted to cry, but had no tears. Then he ran away. Oh my God, this horrible human is chasing after me. What should I do? Mom, Dad, where are you? The rock giant was scared out of his wits. Seeing that Zhuowen was chasing after him, he almost cried for his mom and dad. His legs, which were still intact, were running at the fastest speed he had ever run in his life. If he did not run faster, his legs would be cut off by this cruel human. He was completely afraid of this abominable human. The rock giant looked at his 4 limbs being refined by Zhuowen into pure energy, and turned into Zhuowen's own energy. The rock giant's eyelids twitched, and his heart was filled with sorrow. In any case, he was still a cultivator-level evil spirit. In the dark world of this small world, he could be considered an overlord. However, his limbs had been chopped off by a mere human and refined. Moreover, it had been done right under his nose. Among the countless warrior-level evil spirits, he was the only one. Half an hour later, Zhuowen completely refined a rock giant's left arm and legs. The energy in his body was abundant, but he was still a little short of a breakthrough. Zhuowen looked greedily at the rock giant. He licked his lips and asked, Peak warrior-level evil spirits, you still haven't summoned them? Feeling Zhuowen's burning gaze, the rock giant cursed in his heart. After this guy refined his 4 limbs, is he eyeing his remaining body? However, the rock giant answered Zhuowen cautiously. They have been summoned. They're not far from here, but the headless statue's light source is too bright, so they don't dare to come close. Zhuowen resisted the urge to attack the rock giant and put away the headless statue. This rock giant was very useful to him, so he didn't plan to kill him. Once again, the surroundings fell into darkness. Then, Zhuowen noticed several terrifying black shadows rushing out from the surrounding rocks. There were close to 100 of these black shadows, and all of them were peak warrior-level evil spirits. These evil spirits stared greedily at Zhuowen. If it weren't for the rock giant suppressing them with his momentum, they would have already rushed up to Zhuowen and devoured him. Well done! Zhuowen nodded his head in satisfaction. He then charged into the group of evil spirits and attacked them with his hands and feet. Majestic, grand mist god force flowed out from his body like a long river and revolved around him. Every time he reached the evil spirits, this long river seemed to have gained intelligence, and it would wrap around the evil spirits and refine them. These evil spirits were restless, but under the pressure of the giant stone man, they did not dare to move. Therefore, Zhuowen was able to easily capture and refine the evil spirits as if they were toys in his hands. When Zhuowen finished refining the last evil spirit, he suddenly looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. His roar was filled with carefreeness. After refining close to 100 peak warrior-level evil spirits, Huang Xiaolong's accumulation of energy was finally enough, and he successfully broke through to the next realm. Muffled, thunderous sounds could be heard coming from his body. They were continuous and unending, and they were getting louder and louder. Rumble. If he wasn't wrong, this guy's cultivation was only at the late 5 elements transformation stage, but his aura was so vast that it far exceeded that of 5 element transformation stage cultivator. There were even many yin-yang transformation stage cultivators whose auras were not as strong as this young man in front of him. Mother asterisk her, I've really kicked an iron plate this time. This guy is simply a monster. Not only is his exorcism power terrifying, but his strength is also abnormally terrifying. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.